Chapter 343. Boom! The grade D electric pole relic smashed onto the ground, causing the ground to shatter. However, Urieli was nowhere to be seen on the shattered ground and under the electric pole. Urieli was not sent back to the martyr's palace either. Instead, "Gosh, I almost died," Urieli grumbled. "Sister?" Anna looked in the direction of the voice. At the same time, Mashu and Gadotsi also looked at him. He saw a man wearing a black windbreaker, black leather shoes, and a black top hat standing on top of a pile of rubble. The man was carrying two identical girls in his arms. They were Steno, who had escaped, and Urieli, who had almost died under Berserker's baton. "Ah! It's the mysterious assassin!" Gadotsi screamed. The man was Wuming, who had rushed over with Steno. "You took so long to come back, assassin." Urieli sat in Wuming's arms, holding Wuming's neck to keep her balance. She complained to Wuming in a dissatisfied tone. "Which family are you from? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have saved you. One Steno is enough for me." Wuming said helplessly. "How can you blame me for that? You're not a gentleman at all." Just like Urieli, Steno sat in Wuming's other arms. She held Wuming's neck to keep her balance while refuting Wuming. Wuming walked toward Gadotsi with Steno. Wuming noticed Berserker in the enchantment. Berserker was the Berserker who seemed to be one of the Knights of the Round Table. When he suddenly encountered Berserker, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Wuming directly used Jack the Ripper's inherent barrier, the mist, to trap Berserker inside. Wuming had used the tactic of trapping the enemy in the enchantment before. Wuming had set up a large number of magic formations in the enchantment. After bringing Angelica and Beatrice into the enchantment, Wuming retreated. Wuming could have chosen not to enter the enchantment, but he had to say a few words to them. Although the caster of the enchantment was neither scientific nor magical, Wuming had such an ability. After all, Wuming was the root dragon. The adaptability of time and space was reflected here. The enchantment was like a flexible Rubik's Cube in Wuming's hand. Wuming could arrange the enchantment in various ways. After that, Wuming took Olga and Marie away from there and went to a small shop not far away. Wuming left some mana in the enchantment, which was enough to support Wuming and the others. The enchantment disappeared, and Berserker was released. After that, Wuming encountered Gadotsi and the others, as well as Steno and Urieli who were chasing them. After using his noble phantasm Maria Ripper and the enchantment noble phantasm the Dark Mist, Gadotsi, Steno, and Urieli were transferred to the enchantment. At that time, Berserker, who was trapped in the Dark Mist, had not been released yet. When Wuming chased Steno, he also checked Berserker's location and found that he was quite far away from Wuming, so he was relieved to play with Steno. But after a while, Berserker seemed to have sensed a trace of aura coming from the barrier, and it began to go berserk. Wuming could sense that Berserker was running around in the enchantment. And just when Wuming and Steno were on their way back to Gadotsi and the others, Wuming sensed that Berserker was approaching Gadotsi and the others. After all, the Dark Mist was about the size of London City. Although it was not small, it was not that big either. It could only be said that Berserker was very lucky to have found the location of Gadotsi and the others. As expected of Lucky B, after Wuming sensed all of this, Wuming hurriedly carried Steno and rushed over at full speed. However, Wuming was worried that Gadotsi and the others would have an accident, so he directly used his Dragonist item, which he hadn't used for a long time, and rushed over with agility beyond X. Why do you think Wuming did not hesitate to cheat to bring his treasure trove? It was because the treasures in the treasure trove were really helpful to Wuming. Especially Wuming, who was an assassin at the moment. The treasures were really helpful. After Wuming used an item to speed up his journey, the scene where Wuming saved Urieli, who was about to die under the telephone pole, appeared. The reason why Wuming did not directly remove the enchantment was that Berserker was not far from them, and he might be attacked by other servants. After all, Wuming had verified that Winterwood City had indeed summoned the 7 servants. If he directly removed the enchantment, Berserker would definitely find them. In addition, Berserker did not find Gadotsi and the others in the enchantment, so Wu Ming wanted to meet with Gadotsi and the others to ask something in the enchantment. Obviously, the orange-haired girl and the shield lady were not people of this world. After crossing through time and space, their space-time aura was a bit serious. The reason why Olga Marie did not have the space-time aura was because she was dead. She was just like a servant. She was dead. She was a mass of magic power. She was a spirit. But even so, Wu Ming still suspected that Olga Marie had something to do with Gadotsi and the others. Steno only complained because Wu Ming's super speed scared the goddess. After all, Wu Ming's agility was beyond EX, and he was comparable to Wu Ming's Phoenix incarnation. However, the item that increased speed was not something that everyone could use. If Olga Marie used it, she would explode in an instant. After all, if her physical fitness was not up to par, she naturally couldn't use it. Take Wu Ming's avatar for example. In the world of the gods' layers, Wu Ming's original body had descended. Even though he was still in his infancy state, the origin dragon's physical body that had undergone some minor baptisms had become extremely powerful. Wu Ming's incarnation had limitations because Wu Ming still had room to grow. It was estimated that when Wu Ming was fully grown, Wu Ming could use multiple incarnations at will, and their power would also be greatly improved. But if Wu Ming's incarnation was used by his incarnation, the limitations would be quite big. After all, if the strength of the incarnation was not enough, it would be torn apart in an instant. As for Assassin, the reason why Silent Wonder didn't cheat and let the 12 clones follow him was because Silent Wonder couldn't use any of his clones. Even if he could use them, the power was very small. If Wu Ming used them by force, he would die. Therefore, it was really useful to bring Dragonist, a treasure trove that contained a large number of very useful treasures. At that moment, Berserker, who lost his target, began to roar furiously. Leia. Gadotsi and the others realized that the enemy had not been eliminated yet. Chapter 344. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Anna tensed up when they heard Berserker's roar. Wu Ming, Steno, and Riley, who were in his arms, weren't nervous at all. Steno and Riley were goddesses, so they didn't feel anything from a mere berserker. Even when Riley almost died under Berserker's stick, she didn't react at all. She was still chatting happily with Wu Ming and Steno. Wu Ming, on the other hand, wasn't afraid at all. Wu Ming had been through a lot, so a mere berserker wasn't enough to scare him. Wu Ming wasn't scared at all. Besides, Wu Ming only used the dark mist to trap Berserker because Olga Marie was there. There were many ways to deal with Berserker, but it would be a waste of time to fight Berserker. After all, this city was filled with danger. Olga Marie might already be in danger outside. Berserker was Wu Ming's half-master, after all. It was better to deal with him as soon as possible. Just as Berserker was about to charge at Wu Ming and the others, especially Wu Ming, Berserker realized that his movements were sluggish as if he had fallen into a bottomless swamp. Berserker is indeed Berserker. You didn't even notice the trap I set under your feet? Wu Ming shook his head in boredom. At that moment, a few stones around Berserker lit up. Simple and mysterious runes could be seen on the stones. That's right, they were Lune runes. These stones were rune stones. Just like Rin Enbin and Livia's gem magic, these rune stones had the same effect. Gem magic was to store spells and magic power in gems in advance, and then use them directly when needed. Magicians needed spells and magic power to cast magic, but because the spells and magic power needed to be used were all stored in gems, the use of gem magic was only to release the gems that stored the spells and magic power. Releasing the gems only required a small amount of mana, so gem magic was very practical. However, since the gems used for gem magic were single-use, it was mostly used by nobles. Of course, Rin Enbin didn't look like a noble anymore, but she was telling the truth when she said that she was down and out. As for the rune, it was engraved on the stone in advance. When it was used, it only needed to be released. However, the rune was extremely powerful. Although it wasn't in terms of attack, it was extremely powerful in other aspects. Therefore, the stone made of the rune could be said to be extremely precious. At this moment, the stones that trapped Berserker were engraved with large amounts of runes that had the effect of slowing and suppressing. Just one stone was enough to cause an obvious effect. At this moment, dozens of runes lit up around Berserker. These dozens of rune stones formed an intricate magic formation with Berserker in the center. This magic formation was made of dozens of binding runes. It wasn't easy to bind Berserker, who had an A-rank endurance. Of course, if Berserker could move, he would be able to escape from the magic formation. However, Berserker was like a fish on the chopping block. It was impossible for him to escape. What? If one were to ask Wuming where the runes engraved on the rune stones came from, Wuming would say that when he first learned the rune magic, he would experiment with stones by the roadside. Over time, countless rune stones accumulated. Therefore, Wuming chose a portion of the useful rune stones and stored them in his rune space. Of course, Wuming hadn't completed the rune space at that time, so it was still very small. Therefore, Wuming only stored a small portion of the rune stones and left the rest in the country of shadow. After that, Wuming would sometimes create some rune stones when he was free. After all, Wuming knew that there would be a day when he would need them. Just like now, he couldn't release the true name of the relic in his treasure vault, nor could he use the advanced magic of assassin. Now, he only needed to use a little bit of mana to recreate the Kanzaki magic. One had to know that Silent Cry's mana level was EX. In that case, there was no shortage of mana. Leia. Although Berserker was bound, he still roared unwillingly. Facing the immobile Berserker, Wuming gently placed Stheno and Euryale on the ground, and walked towards Berserker. Wuming came before Berserker and took out 18 rune stones from the black space beside him. As expected, you're Lancelot, right? Wuming said softly. When Wuming said Lancelot's name, Berserker suddenly fell silent for a moment, but soon returned to his frenzied state. Wuming smiled with pity. The hero who was known as the Knight of the Lake, and the Flower of Knights, who had achieved countless feats and received the blessings of the elves, had actually turned into a monster. What a joke. You've been chasing after me. I'm afraid you're obsessed with me. When Wuming was in Camelot, almost all the knights respected, admired, and worshipped Wuming. However, Lancelot was the only one who could be considered a fanatic. However, Lancelot wasn't loyal to Wuming. As Arthur Artoria's knight, Lancelot had always been exceptionally loyal to her, but he also worshipped Wuming fervently. Although he didn't express it, Wuming could feel it. After Wuming's departure, Lancelot's fanaticism shifted to Guinevere. When Guinevere was tricked by Morgan Le Fay to reveal his love for Wuming and was about to be executed, Lancelot didn't hesitate to save Guinevere and escape from Camelot. However, because of this, Lancelot became the second fuse that affected the fall of Britain after Wuming. Surrounding the incident between Lancelot and Guinevere, the people questioned, the nobles stirred up trouble, and Artoria's power was affected. This was a severe psychological blow to Lancelot. Then, Guinevere said, I should be executed. It's not only a release but also a way to lighten the king's burden. After that, Lancelot sent Guinevere back. After that, Artoria successfully exiled Guinevere and saved his life. Lancelot had always been obsessed with Wuming, which was why he kept chasing after Wuming. Not only that, but turning the electric pole into a noble relic and disguising his appearance were also very similar to Lancelot's experience. Defeating the enemy with a tree branch and completing the heroic feat of hiding his identity. Wuming guessed that these two things could be upgraded to noble relic or skill. All these signs were very clear. Coupled with Wuming's probing, Wuming was now very sure that Berserker was Lancelot. I didn't expect to meet you here, Lancelot. How sad. Wuming slowly placed the 18 rune stones around Lancelot and chatted with him. Leia. Lancelot screamed miserably. I know you have a lot to say to me, but let's wait until next time. Compared to Berserker, I think Saber is more suitable for you. After placing the 18 runes on the stones, Wuming turned around and left. At this moment, Lancelot seemed to have calmed down. He stiffly performed a knight's salute to Wooming. Ocht de Godin. A magic spell that was comparable to a city's noble phantasm was released. In an instant, a violent explosion came from behind Wooming. The flames and smoke of the explosion were more than 10 meters high, but it did not burn Wooming and the others at all. Goodbye, Lancelot. Chapter 345. The flames raged and burned the entire city of London. After Berserker left, Wooming deactivated the inherent barrier. Everyone returned to the burning city of Winterwood. Hey, can you hear me? That's great. The device here suddenly showed a large amount of magic, and I couldn't contact you guys. That scared me. Thank goodness you guys are fine. As soon as they returned to Winterwood, Godotzi's wrist glowed, and a virtual screen appeared in front of everyone. On the screen was the face of a kind and dispirited young man. He had the aura of a loser. Is this the magician who made the sound? What a loser. That's right. I thought a magician who can use a remote screen like this would be more reliable. How disgusting. Steno and Euryale looked at the young man on the screen with disdain. What's going on? Wait, what's going on? The young man was frustrated at first, but then he realized that the two followers of the goddess in front of him were enemies. Ahahaha. Anyway, they're not enemies now. Roman, don't worry about it. Godotzi smiled awkwardly. I'll explain the situation to you later, Dr. Roman, Matthew said to the young man seriously. Is that so? Well, it's good that you guys are fine. Just now when I suddenly couldn't contact you guys, everyone was worried sick. The doctor called Roman began to spread the dispirited atmosphere as he constantly complained and complained. Yes, I know, Dr. Roman. Godotzi answered Roman helplessly. Matthew noticed that Wooming, the main person who solved the crisis, did not say anything. He was frowning as if he was thinking about something. Mr. Assassin, are you all right? Matthew asked worriedly. Godotzi, who was talking to Roman, also looked at Wooming. That's right. Mr. Assassin helped us. Please let us know if you have any problems. Godotzi smiled innocently and looked at Wooming, who was standing behind Steno and Euryale. Wooming shook his head. I'm fine. I just want to ask you guys something. Ask us? Godotzi and Matthew looked at each other in confusion. Oh, I need to pick up my master. I'll come back later. Wooming did not wait for them to respond and turned around to leave. By the way, there shouldn't be any danger around here, but a sudden intrusion like just now. You guys should be careful. I'll be back soon. After that, Wooming disappeared. Li Xiang, Mashu, that servant is? Roman asked with a slightly dignified tone. He's the one who helped us subdue the two goddesses, Matthew explained. Also, we met a berserker in Assassin's enchantment. Assassin defeated him easily, Godotzi said excitedly. Enchantment? I guess that's why we can't contact you. Roman touched his chin and pondered. Then, do you know the real names of the berserker and the assassin who left, and the real names of the two goddesses? Roman's voice became very soft. He looked at Steno and Euryale carefully. After all, he was a little embarrassed in front of the two goddesses. How dare you talk about the goddesses in front of them, magician who's not here? Steno was an assassin after all, so he could naturally hear it. My real name is Steno, and this is my sister, Euryale. Before Godotzi and the others could react, Steno said his and Euryale's real names casually. After all, we've been defeated by that man. As goddesses, we're prepared to become his captives. Euryale explained why the two of them had told her their real names without hesitation. She also explained why they were no longer enemies. Is that so? Roman's shoulders drooped helplessly. Godotzi tried to recall the real names of Wooming and the berserker who was defeated by Wooming. I don't know Mr. Assassin's real name, but as for Berserker's real name, I remember Mr. Assassin called him Lancelot. What? Without waiting for Gadotsi to finish, Roman interrupted him in surprise, and even gave Gadotsi a fright. Matthew came to Gadotsi's side and shielded Gadotsi with his body. Then, he protested to Roman, "Doctor, please keep your voice down. You're scaring the seniors." "I'm sorry, but this is shocking news." Roman put his palms together and apologized. Then, his expression turned serious. Matthew and Gadotsi were confused. "Judging from your tone, Mr. Assassin called him Lancelot, right? If that's the case, he can't be a nobody." Roman looked at them seriously. "Someone who can defeat the Knight of the Lake can't be weak, even if the Knight of the Lake has lost his mind. That assassin is very strong." "Doctor, what do you mean?" Gadotsi understood. "Although you don't know Mr. Assassin's real name, there is no doubt that he can rival the Knights of the Round Table and even surpass them. To be honest, I really don't understand why such a person is Mr. Assassin. Although the Knights of the Round Table have berserker adaptability, I still find it hard to accept. After all, the Knights of the Round Table were noble knights. Even the rebellious Knight Mordred didn't do anything that violated the Knight's code." The reason why Roman was surprised that Wu Ming, as an assassin, could defeat berserker was because assassins were generally weak. Generally, they can only be used to collect information and assassinate their master. Let alone berserker, even caster sometimes can't defeat them, let alone rider, saber, lancer, and archer with 3 mounts. That was why caster and assassin were known as the weakest among the 7 classes. Caster was also a powerful enemy after the workshop was completed, but assassin didn't have any other advantages, so sometimes assassin was even weaker than caster. But he used assassin to defeat Stheno, who is also an assassin, and even Euryale, who is an archer. After that, he still had the strength to defeat berserker. It seems that you have encountered a powerful servant. The more Roman analyzed, the brighter Matthew and Gadotsi's eyes became. Stheno and Euryale kept smiling as they watched the 3 of them talking. They didn't interrupt. After all, they knew Wu Ming's identity, so they wouldn't be too surprised by some things. And according to the various phenomena just now, he can be said to be a very easy person to get along with. If his master agrees, you can cooperate with them to solve the mutation of Singularity F. If he didn't have a master, I would have asked Tachika to sign a contract with him. With him, I won't worry about your safety anymore." Roman looked regretful. "That's great. Matthew, I can solve this singularity soon." Gadotsi hugged Matthew happily. Although Roman meant that Matthew couldn't guarantee Gadotsi's safety, Matthew knew that Roman didn't think so much, so he didn't say anything. He just smiled and nodded to Gadotsi. "Matthew. Tachika Fujimaru." Suddenly, a familiar voice came to Gadotsi and others. Chapter 346. Matthew. Tachika Fujimaru. A familiar voice came, and the 2 couldn't help but look at the source of the voice. Wu Ming and Olga Marie stood not far away. Wu Ming didn't do anything, but Olga Marie looked like she had finally found the organization. Of course, she wouldn't admit it. "Director, are you still alive?" Sure enough, Roman was a rather clumsy person. "What do you mean, Roman Aikman? Are you looking forward to my death?" Obviously, Roman Aikman was his real name, and Roman was an abbreviation. Olga Marie angrily walked to the virtual screen and stared at Roman. How could that be, Director? It's great that you're okay." Roman tiredly dealt with Olga Marie, feeling rather helpless. "Director also successfully came here, that's great," Matthew said happily when he saw that Olga Marie was fine. Olga Marie was a little unnatural when she heard Matthew's words. Wu Ming felt that Olga Marie was a little resistant to Matthew, or more accurately, she felt guilty. "Seems like there's a story." Wu Ming thought carefully. "That's great, Director is also fine." Gadotsi also smiled happily. "Ahem. Speaking of which, are you the only 2 here? Where are the others, and why are you sitting in this position, and where is Lev?" Olga Marie asked, then looked at Roman on the virtual screen. Wu Ming, who was behind Olga Marie, slightly raised his eyebrows when he heard this, but quickly returned to normal. Sure enough, Lev is indeed related to this group of people, but it seems, they don't know Lev's true identity. Through the behavior of this group of people, Wu Ming could naturally see their character, and it was obvious that they were not on the same side as Leviticus. Wu Ming looked at the male lead on the screen. Only this male lead was something that Wu Ming couldn't see through. The so-called couldn't see through meant that Roman was like a god and like a human, like a living person and like a dead person. If there's a chance, I still have to meet this person in person. Wu Ming always had a feeling that Roman was not the culprit behind the burning of Winterwood City, but also the person who couldn't get away from the root cause of the black mud. Because of Olga Marie's doubts, Roman didn't notice Wu Ming's gaze. Currently, except for Tachika Fujimaru, the rest of the 47 masters are trapped in the shell's body and are. Because the explosion was in the center of the control, Roman said regretfully. Wu Ming couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, he held it back in time and didn't reveal it. If a mere explosion could kill Lev, Wu Ming would thank the heavens. Lev. But after hearing this bad news, Olga Marie looked like she couldn't accept it. Through the magical connection between Wu Ming and Olga Marie, Wu Ming could clearly sense that Olga Marie's magical power was very unstable. If he had to describe it, it would be like a human after their faith collapsed. But Olga Marie was indeed a famous magician. She quickly calmed down and began to understand the condition of their base through Roman, and began to give orders. Wu Ming wasn't interested in listening to this. He walked over to the Gorgon sisters and Anna's young master, Sakura Madu. Anna was sitting on a small rock with the sleeping Sakura Madu in her arms. Steno and Urieli were sitting on the left of Anna and Sakura Madu. Wu Ming walked over, and Steno spoke first. You finally have time to talk to me. I thought you had forgotten about me. Steno narrowed her eyes at Wu Ming, who was walking over. What a greedy man. Not only did he capture me, but he also captured another me and heartlessly abandoned us. How heartless, Urieli continued Steno's words and also narrowed her eyes at Wu Ming. I wouldn't dare to capture the goddess. I heard that anyone who has anything to do with the gods of Greek mythology doesn't have a good ending, Wu Ming shrugged and said disinterestedly. But those are all mortals. If it's you, I don't think you'll suffer, Steno said cheerfully. Wu Ming ignored the two of them. He walked to Anna's right and sat down. Is she asleep? Wu Ming looked at Sakura Madu and asked Anna. After all, she was his sister-in-law in another world. He should at least show some concern. Thank you for not killing my sister. Anna replied first. Then, she thanked Wu Ming softly. By now, Anna's identity had been made known to everyone. She was the youngest sister of the Gorgon sisters. She had devoured two of her sisters and turned into a monster, Medusa. Of course, the current Anna was Medusa's infant body. In other words, she hadn't killed her sisters yet. Although she had made up her mind to kill Steno and Urieli, it was undoubtedly torture for Anna. Steno and Urieli loved their sister. Just like how Anna would protect Urieli, Anna also loved her sister deeply. If it weren't for the curse, Medusa wouldn't have devoured her sister to protect her chastity. Even though Steno and Urieli did it willingly, it was still a torture for Medusa. It was the pain of killing her loved ones. I didn't want to see such a curse. That's why I chose to do it. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi and the others as he conversed with Anna. But because of that, I've been on the brink of death, Urieli suddenly interrupted. Jack the Ripper's relic, Mary Ripper, was a curse. There were 3 conditions to trigger the curse. Fog, night, and the target is a female. Back then, Wu Ming had activated the relic during the day. Although Wu Ming had released the fog, which was the dark fog, and the target, Urieli, was a female, Mary Ripper, which didn't fulfill the 3 conditions, only dealt damage. As Wu Ming had deliberately held back in Urieli's skills and the god's core of the goddess helped to block the attack, Urieli didn't die. However, it also caused Uriah to be unable to move. After all, Uriah was indeed injured, and Silent Wonder had placed the pseudo-sky lock on her, which almost caused her to die at Lancelot's hands. Although you came in time to save me, you're the one who caused me to be in danger. Remember to take responsibility, Stheno finished for Uriah. Help me protect my beloved sister, the two of them said in unison. Chapter 347. Wu-Ming raised an eyebrow at Stheno and Uriah's shameless request. You two really know how to take advantage of the situation. Why did he say that? It was because Stheno and Uriah seemed to have been connected when they came into contact with Wu-Ming. They knew Wu-Ming's identity. He was an extremely powerful and majestic legendary dragon from beyond this world, the Dragon of Origin. The two of them knew about the dangers of the Holy Grail War, so they wanted to protect Anna. However, they were unable to protect Anna, so they wanted Anna to kill her and recreate the legend of the Gorgon monster. The appearance of the Gorgon meant that they had the power to protect themselves, but Wu-Ming disrupted their plan. However, through Wu-Ming, Stheno and Uriah found the hope of protecting Anna, so they made the request. Sister. Anna looked at Stheno and Uriah, touched. Although she was already dead, and her safety was no longer a concern, she was still happy to hear that someone cared about her. Sure enough, no matter what, my sister still loves me. Anna thought to herself. However, Stheno and Uriah stood up as if they were interrogating him. They walked to Wu-Ming and looked into his eyes. So, what's your answer? The two asked in unison. I didn't want to fight the other servants. My goal is to solve this disaster, Wu-Ming said in confusion, which made Stheno and Uriah a little unhappy. However, now is the time for the servants to unite. Of course, I won't abandon Anna, my ally. Wu-Ming put his hand on Anna's head. Then, Anna slapped Wu-Ming's hand away. Don't touch my head. Anna stared at Wu-Ming with her small eyes under the hood. She was especially intimidating. Wu-Ming raised his hand that was slapped away by Anna and smiled awkwardly. Stheno and Uriah smiled as well. Of course, they were laughing because Wu-Ming was defeated by Anna. Wu-Ming looked at his hand in confusion. That shouldn't be. May you and the others like it when I touch their heads. Did my affinity aura lose its effectiveness after becoming an assassin? Wu-Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about it. By the way, you two are now someone else's servants, right? Wu-Ming looked at Stheno and Uriah. That's right. Our master is a green tall hat man. Stheno nodded. She must have used the Holy Grail to cheat, Uriah said. That's how she was able to summon the 7 servants again. And it doesn't exclude the possibility that he can continue to summon servants. Wu-Ming nodded. Stheno was right. After all, Wu-Ming did not feel that Lev was a human being. Since he could maintain the contract of 8 servants, including Artoria, he was definitely not an ordinary person. However, it did not exclude the possibility that Lev had placed the contract on Artoria's heart, which was the Holy Grail. You wrapped this chain around me to prevent my master from using the command incantation, right? Uriah raised her small hand. The silver-white chain with golden light decorated her like a priceless accessory. Ah, I have one too. Is this a slave's chain? Stheno also raised his wrist and said with a wicked smile. Although it's a simplified version of Enkidu, it's still a divine weapon. It's still effective against gods, Wu-Ming explained. Although I wanted to kill you to be safe, I still had some questions to ask you, so I kept you two alive. Now it seems that you two are really a burden, Wu-Ming said with disdain. Don't talk about my sister like that. Anna glared at Wu-Ming angrily. Her face under the cloak was full of dissatisfaction. Then, Sakura Madhu woke up. Wu-Ming was able to escape from Anna's glare. Wu-Ming even wondered if he would be petrified if Anna glared at him for a while longer. Wu-Ming then took out some high-level runestones and sealed Stheno and Uriah's mana. He also added a series of negative buffs to their attacks. Of course, Wuming only did this after they agreed. After all, Wuming was not a bad person. Cough, cough, soon, Olga Marie finished giving Roman her orders. Anyway, you will replace me as the commander of Chaldea for now. We'll talk about it after I return, Olga Marie said with an imposing tone as she flipped her hair. Yes, sir. Roman was also affected by Olga Marie's imposing manner. He nodded solemnly. However, Wuming shook his head regretfully when he heard Olga Marie's last sentence. After all, Olga Marie was already dead. She could now be considered a heroic spirit. Other humans could enter the heroic spirit palace after death, but Olga Marie would disappear after this crisis was resolved. Moreover, she would truly die. She wouldn't exist in the heroic spirit palace. If possible, I'd better save her. Wuming thought to himself. No matter what, Olga Marie was still half a servant to Wuming. Even if she had bad intentions at the beginning, Wuming now understood Olga Marie. He felt that Olga Marie was still a good person. If he could save her, he should. Are you done with your discussion? Can you answer my question? Wuming and the other servants walked towards Olga Marie, Gadotsi, and the others. Stheno and Euryale naturally followed Wuming. As for Anna, she followed her sister. This resulted in Olga Marie, Matthew, and Gadotsi standing on one side, while Wuming, Stheno, Euryale, Anna, and Anna's master, Sakura Madhu, stood on the other side. The situation was slightly serious. Wuming had 4 servants on his side, while Olga Marie only had Matthew, a demi-servant. At best, he was a human with the power of a servant, but at worst, he was a half-servant. Looking at the slightly tense scene, Roman on the other side of the screen gulped. What do you want to know? Olga Marie calmly looked at Wuming, her nominal servant. Please tell me where you came from and your intentions. I will judge whether you can get our help based on your answers. Wuming looked into Olga Marie's eyes. Although with Wuming's hearing, he was almost as good as Stheno and the others when they were pooping. Is this why you volunteered to be my servant? Olga Marie couldn't help but ask. That's not the point. The point is the name you called when you were in danger, Leviticus. When she heard the name Lev from Wuming's mouth, Olga Marie's eyes suddenly shrank. You, know, or no, Rafe? Chapter 348. Then, Wuming told them about his exploration of the Yuanzang mountain, where he met Saber, and a man in a green tall hat, who called himself Rafe Lenore Floros. He killed Saber's master, and put the Holy Grail into Saber's heart in an unknown way, and according to Rafe, he received the king's order to exterminate the human race. Then, when I wanted to attack Rafe, Saber used the Holy Grail to activate the noble phantasm, and I was blown away. Stheno and the other 7 servants were summoned after I was blown away. Wuming's words made Olga Marie, Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman show an expression of disbelief. That man gave us the order to destroy all the creatures in this city, but I always feel that he wanted to get rid of this man. Stheno looked at Wuming, and it was obvious that this man was Wuming. In short, I always feel that this Rafe should be the Rafe that you said has been sacrificed. That's why I followed you, Olga Marie. Wuming finished and waited quietly. After all, Olga Marie and the others needed time to digest. It's unbelievable. Professor Rafe actually. Roman on the other side of the screen said with a somewhat dull voice. Professor Rafe gave me a pretty good impression. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head. Well, Professor Rafe is very popular in Chaldea, I didn't expect. Matthew's eyes dimmed. I don't allow you to insult Rafe. Suddenly, Olga Marie roared and interrupted them. Rafe is dead. Even if he is still alive, Rafe would not want to destroy the human race. Although Olga Marie was shocked, she didn't waver because of soundless one-sided words. Let's not talk about the fact that Rafe was at the center of the explosion in the control room. It's impossible for him to survive. Furthermore, even if Rafe is still alive, he has no reason to destroy human beings like you said, Olga Marie argued. So, I don't believe what you said. I don't think Rafe would do such a thing. In the end, Olga Marie stared at Wu Ming's eyes, quite like an angry little female cat. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile. He knew that this would be the result. When facing danger, her first reaction was to ask Rafe for help. It seemed that Olga Marie really relied on Rafe. People's hearts are unpredictable. Although Rafe is a kind and reliable person in your eyes, you are too dependent on him and ignored his negative side. What if he is pretending? Wu Ming began to preach to Marie. You. Olga Marie glared at Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming interrupted Olga Marie, who was about to say something. And, weren't you in the center of the explosion center? Wu Ming's words were like a sharp thorn that pierced the hearts of the Chaldeans. Yes, why was the director in the center of the explosion alive? Since there was already an example, it was not unacceptable that Rafe, who was in the center of the explosion, was still alive. Moreover, if the explosion was arranged by Rafe, it's not strange that he is alive. Wu Ming's words were very heavy. This sentence, like a sharper thorn, pierced everyone's heart. Now, Gadotsi and Matthew were completely confused. On the other hand, Roman had a thoughtful look on his face. But Olga Marie still didn't believe, and wanted to refute Wu Ming's words. Well, it's also possible that someone pretended to be Rafe, first to frame him, and second to deceive people. Wu Ming's tone was light. He shrugged his shoulders and waved to the crowd. In an instant, the original atmosphere was like a balloon, burst by Wu Ming's words. Everything is possible. Ha 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 ha. Wu Ming laughed. The nervous crowd suddenly relaxed. Assassin. Then, Olga Marie, who felt like she had been played, was furious again. Ha ha ha. Looking at the arrogant Olga Marie angry, Wu Ming couldn't help but laugh. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman were relieved. Assassin is right. It's also possible that someone used the image of the dead Professor Rafe to do evil. Matthew said righteously. And you still have the task to solve the singularity, and according to Assassin, this singularity was caused by the guy who pretended to be Rafe. Roman continued Matthew's words. Then we are bound to confront the fake, damn it. How dare he pretend to be Rafe? I must teach him a lesson. Olga Marie also calmed down, but they still talked about the guy who pretended to be Rafe. Then everyone, let's work hard together. Gadotsi clenched her fists and encouraged everyone with a smile. Of course there's no problem with Assassin. But you, sleepyhead, just don't make trouble. Olga Marie crossed her arms and looked at Gadotsi with disdain. After all, Wu Ming was still Olga Marie's follower. Even if there were doubts and distrust between the two sides, Olga Marie was relieved that they could talk like this. It's good to be motivated, but usually, such a team of heroes will be wiped out in the end. Steno smiled and looked at Gadotsi and the others. Steno and Urieli didn't speak before because they knew how to read people's expressions. As for Anna and Sakura Madu, they were the kind of people who didn't talk much. Now that everyone had left the oppressive atmosphere, Steno couldn't help but mock them. The goddess who has lost her ability to fight should take care of herself. Olga Marie was indeed arrogant and dared to confront the goddess. Director, she's a goddess, please be a little more polite. Gadotsi whispered in Olga Marie's ear. Miss Steno too, please calm down. Matthew also tried to calm them down. Seeing how energetic they were, Wu Ming also calmed down. Wu Ming didn't think that Rafe Lionel Floros was a fake. Wu Ming said that someone might be pretending to be Rafe because he wanted to take care of his temporary master's feelings. Rafe's tone when he introduced himself didn't sound like an imposter at all. Wu Ming used his omnipotent senses to confirm that this was the real Rafe and not an imposter. After all, sometimes mentality and momentum were the key to victory. So, it's time to answer my question. Wu Ming suddenly asked. Everyone just remembered that the two sides were supposed to exchange information. That's true. Then, I, who interrogated your master, will tell you. Olga Marie stood up. Chapter 349. Olga Marie briefly explained their situation to Wu Ming. They came from a research organization called Chaldea in the future. Its full name was Finus Chaldea, or Chaldea for short. In 2015, Chaldea detected that human beings would go extinct in 2016, so they began to study the cause of human extinction. Later, Chaldea's people found a singularity in history under the detection of the near-future observation lens, SHIBA. To put it simply, singularities were cancer cells that were formed from irregular history within the regular history. It was a cancer that could endanger the entire history of human beings. This singularity was where Wu Ming and the others were, the unrecorded Winterwood City Holy Grail War in 2004. They determined that this singularity was the cancer that would make human beings go extinct in 2016. Therefore, they used Chaldea's device that could send masters through time and space, and prepared to send 48 magicians with ray-shift adaptability and master performance to this era to solve this singularity. However, for unknown reasons, when the 47 masters were preparing to be sent, Chaldea was hit by an explosion. Most of the facilities were damaged, and the survivors were less than 20 people except for the 47 frozen masters. The reason why 47 people were frozen was because Gadotsi, the master, dozed off during a meeting and was kicked out by Olga Marie. It had to be said that Gadotsi was really lucky. Then, when Gadotsi wanted to save Matthew, she was trapped in the central control room. Originally a human, Matthew was summoned by Chaldea and bestowed with power when he was on the verge of death. Then the ray shift automatically selected masters, and Gadotsi and her servant, Matthew, were brought to this world. As for the rest, Wu Ming knew most of it, so Wu Ming stopped Olga Marie, who still wanted to continue speaking. I understand the general situation. In short, you need to solve this singularity, and let history return to the right path, right? Yes, that's true, but what's the matter with your easy voice? Said Olga Marie crossly. After all, the city had summoned 14 servants, and it was very dangerous. My mission is also to protect this world from calamity. Although I'm still an assassin, I'm not that strong, but if there's a chance, I'll change my class. What? Olga Marie, Roman, Gadotsi and the others were shocked. Even Stheno, Urieli, and the others were shocked. The reason why servants were servants was because their spirit base was fixed and they couldn't change their class. However, Wu Ming actually said that he wanted to change his class, which undoubtedly surprised everyone. Well, after all, I am special. Wu Ming smiled. But aren't you breaking the rules? Changing your class and rank? Roman began to mutter. That's only if there's a chance. It's not that easy to change your class. Wu Ming shrugged. In short, let's leave here first. If we stay in the same place for a long time, it's inevitable that other servants will come to find us. Everyone nodded in agreement. After that, Roman said that if they needed help, they could contact him and then turned off the communication. After all, Chaldea still needed him. Then, Wu Ming, Olga Marie, Gadotsi, Matthew, Stheno, Urieli, Anna, and Sakura Madhu formed a small team and embarked on the path to defeat the Great Demon King. Soon, Wu Ming and the others arrived at the villa where Wu Ming and Gilgamesh lived. The reason why they came here was because of Stheno's words. The other side has a servant that can kill a god. Are you sure you want to go directly to Yuanzhang Mountain? Although Olga Marie and the others had already chosen Yuanzhang Mountain as their target, because of Stheno's words, everyone had to follow Wu Ming. And also because of Wu Ming's words. I have a super first-class servant with me. In this way, Olga Marie and the others followed Wu Ming to the villa. In the small villa, Wu Ming skillfully prepared tea for everyone, and then casually sat down as if it was his own home. It seems that she's not at home. Wu Ming didn't find Gilgamesh in the house. Thinking about it, Gilgamesh wasn't a person who would stay idle. Perhaps she left after discovering the change. But he didn't rule out the possibility that she went to find him. With the idea of a short rest, Wu Ming didn't rush to leave with everyone. Gorgon's 3 sisters didn't feel uncomfortable. After all, the 3 of them were goddesses. Sakura Madhu was too young to care, and Gadotsi and the others were sitting on the sofa with a slightly strange expression. What's wrong? Wu Ming naturally saw their doubts, so he directly asked. That. Is this the house of assassins' previous master? Matthew asked. Gadotsi and Olga Marie also nodded. After all, Wu Ming's move was too skillful. It felt like he was the owner of this house. If it was their master's house, it would make sense. No, this house was bought in my name, and I originally didn't have a master. Wu Ming calmly took a sip of tea and then said. Hey hey hey. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie immediately yelled. I forgot to tell you this. I came here on my own initiative. If I have to say, my master should be the Great Holy Grail. Wu Ming calmly took another sip of tea and slowly said. Wait a minute, what's going on? Olga Marie slammed the cup on the table and looked at Wu Ming like she was looking at an animal. The sound of the teacup being put down scared Gadotsi and Matthew. If the teacup wasn't sturdy enough, the boiling hot tea would have spilled onto Olga Marie's hand. Although I know your identity is not ordinary and can change your class, but can you still show up on your own accord? Wu Ming calmly took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. He then looked at Olga Marie without any emotion. That's right. Sorry, my identity is not ordinary, so I can do whatever I want. Director. Calm down. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. Then Olga Marie angrily sat on the sofa and then grumbled by herself. She kept muttering, how can you cheat like this? It's really against the rules. By the way, is the companion that assassin mentioned not here? Matthew awkwardly smiled and began to change the topic to discuss the purpose of everyone here. She probably left here to find me. Wu Ming smiled. Don't worry, it can be said that no one can kill her. Of course, if her stubbornness flares up, the result might be different, thinking that if Gilgamesh was angered, it meant that he had lost half the battle, especially with Lancer, who had the power to kill gods. If Gilgamesh fought him head-on, he would be at a disadvantage. Let's take a break here. After all, if we plan for the worst, we should still have 6 enemies. Wu Ming looked at everyone seriously. Chapter 350. Whoosh. Wu Ming pulled out a moving blackboard and began to explain the power of both sides. In order to distinguish the 7 servants in my group and the 7 servants summoned by the enemy, now use N and O as the distinguishing words. Wu Ming took out a pointer and knocked on the blackboard. New and old, it feels so perfunctory. Someone complained. Then use black and red. Hearing someone complaining, Wu Ming knocked on the blackboard again and changed his mind. Now, let's talk about the situation. Wu Ming coughed and began his speech. According to Stheno, the new 7 servants defeated the black berserker at the beginning, and I defeated the red berserker just now. The berserkers on both sides have already left. Although Hercules had 12 trials, in the face of 7 servants, and all of them were not weak, naturally, he could not survive. And the black archer, well, I am familiar with him, so he is an ally. Wu Ming was still thinking about whether to tell them that he was the master of the archer. After all, Wu Ming's hands had been wearing gloves, Gadotsi and others did not find the command seal. After thinking about it, Wu Ming decided not to tell them. In fact, it was just Wu Ming's bad taste, and I know the black caster. In the current situation, he will definitely choose to help us. Not counting him, Black Archer, Red Assassin Stheno and Red Archer Urieli, and Black Lancer Anna and Matthew, we already have 6 servants. Wu Ming pointed out the advantages of his side. But the enemy's lineup is not weak. Wu Ming began to point out the weaknesses. First of all, the black saber is the famous King Arthur. I don't know the real name of the rider, but the other side has the existence of the undead core. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, Olga, Marie and the others looked worried. King Arthur, undead core, both of these were very troublesome. Then there's the red team. We don't know the red saber's real name. We only know that he's a wretched man. However, to be able to hold the position of saber, he's definitely not a simple person, Wu Ming said. Everyone nodded. As for Lancer, I think he's the most difficult to deal with right now. According to Stheno's description, Lancer is very likely to be the great hero of India, Karna, Wuming said calmly. Karna? Matthew and Olga Marie were shocked. So that's how it is. No wonder it gave me such a dangerous feeling, Stheno said. If it's the hero who's doing charity, it's indeed very disadvantageous for us, Urieli added. What? Who is Karna? After all, Gadotsi had been an ordinary person before. She didn't know about Hindu mythology, so it was normal that she didn't know about Karna. He's known as the hero who's doing charity. He's a hero in one of the two great epics of India, the Mahabharata. He's said to be the son of the sun god Surya, the hero bestowed by the heavens, and the strongest enemy of Arjuna, Olga Marie explained. In the Mahabharata, Karna has a golden armor that's connected to his skin. It was given to him by his father, the sun god Surya, to protect himself. It's basically invulnerable, Wuming explained. But his strongest weapon is the god-killing spear that he gave up the golden armor, Matthew said solemnly. God-killing spear? Indra tricked Karna into giving him the golden armor. Out of guilt, he gave Karna the lightning spear that can kill gods. It's undoubtedly a weapon against gods. At full power, no god can defend against it, Wuming said nostalgically. Wuming had fought Karna before and won. However, there was no doubt that Wuming cheated. He was temporarily given the evil noble phantasm by the suppression force. He locked Karna as evil and took advantage of the opportunity to hurt Karna, who had lost his golden armor. If Wuming had fought Karna with Sodlek's saber rank, there was no doubt that Wuming would have lost. No matter how much Wuming disguised himself as Sodlek, Sodlek was still a human general after all. The mystery was different, and he was crushed by Karna. Wuming shook his head and shook his head to stop thinking about it. Especially the servants with divinity. Once Karna releases his noble phantasm, he'll most likely die. Wuming's words hit everyone's heart quite hard. What's more, Karna is a brave warrior. His martial arts have reached the peak. Ordinary servants will soon be defeated if they fight against him. Wuming looked at everyone and said earnestly. At least you guys have no chance of winning. This sentence made Matthew and Anna lower their heads. That's right. One of them was a demi-servant, and the other was an immature child. It was indeed difficult for them to fight against Karna, who could kill gods. However, Stheno and Urieli didn't feel depressed. You're talking about us, not you, right? Urieli smiled. Hearing Urieli's words, Matthew and Anna raised their heads and looked at Wuming. This made Wuming feel helpless. I once met Karna with a different rank, and I was lucky enough to defeat him. This surprised everyone, especially Gadotsi. That's amazing, Mr. Assassin. But that's when I was in a different rank. If I were to fight Karna with my current assassin rank, I would definitely die. Wuming shook his head. But you can change your rank, right? Then change your rank, Olga Marie said casually. The others also looked at Wuming in agreement. I also said that there are conditions to change a rank. It just so happens that I don't meet the conditions at the moment. Wuming waved his hand helplessly. Then, how can we win this hero over? From the Mahabharata, we can see that he is a righteous man. Olga Marie thought for a moment and said quickly. Impossible. Wuming directly denied Olga Marie's words. Why? Olga Marie slammed the table unconvinced. I fought with Karna, and in that battle, I learned about Karna's character. Wuming poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip. He is a servant who completely obeys the master's words. He completely wants to turn himself into a weapon, even though the servant is the master's weapon, Wuming said, a little bored. Ah. Then we are definitely going to lose. Gadotsi said, a little depressed. Senpai. Matthew wanted to comfort Gadotsi, but he didn't know what to say. After all, the enemy was too strong, and they couldn't win him over. That's why I brought you here, isn't it? Wuming smiled. Huh. Chapter 351. Do you mean that your companion here, the servant, can help us deal with Karna? Olga Marie was indeed one of the 12 monarchs. Although she was still young, her mind worked quickly. Yes, if she's steady, she can be said to be invincible. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Then, assassin, can you tell us her real name? Gadotsi asked curiously. Wait a minute, senpai, it's rude to ask for her real name as soon as we meet, Matthew said nervously. After all, the real name was the secret of every servant. Many times, the weakness of a servant could be known through the real name. Is it that serious? Gadotsi touched her head. After all, Gadotsi didn't understand these rules, so Wu Ming certainly wouldn't be angry. Don't worry, just knowing her real name won't affect her. Wu Ming smiled. The ancient king, the hero king, Gilgamesh. That's her name. After Wu Ming said this, Olga Marie, Matthew, Steno, and the others gasped. The hero king, Gilgamesh? Gadotsi asked in confusion. The ancient king who collected almost all the treasures in the world and cut off the connection between gods and humans. That's already the highest level of heroic spirit, Olga Marie said. I didn't expect that person to be attracted by the Holy Grail War. How ironic, Steno said. Wu Ming knew what Steno was talking about. The ancient king, who had almost all the treasures in the world and supreme power, was reduced to a servant and participated in the dirty magician ceremony. The Holy Grail War was a dirty ceremony, a war that was triggered by the selfishness of magicians using the weapons called servants. War was dirty. Whether it was in the name of righteousness or something else, the essence of war would never change. This was also why Joan of Arc felt that her hands were dirty. Even if the French army was the righteous side in the war between England and France, and even if Joan of Arc had been holding the holy flag on the battlefield and did not kill anyone, she still participated in the war. Because of her filth, she did not refuse the trial, did not argue for herself, and did not feel that it was unfair. She calmly accepted the burning at the stake. Wu Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about Joan of Arc. In short, the hero king, Gilgamesh, is definitely on our side. The direction is good. After Wu Ming finished speaking, everyone's heart sank. Although they hadn't seen that king, they were sure that he was very reliable. For now, let's stay here for one night. Let's not talk about Olga Marie, Tachika must be very tired. Gadotsi smiled embarrassedly when he heard himself being mentioned. I'm a little tired, senpai, take good care of your body. Matthew said with concern. Ha ha ha, I know, Matthew. Gadotsi responded to Matthew and smiled happily. However, Wu Ming always felt that she was full of emotions. Wait a minute, why exclude me? I'm also very tired. Olga Marie said rather angrily. Well, you're my master. How can you be tired so quickly? Be strong. Wu Ming teased Olga Marie. Damn it. Assassin, you bastard. Olga Marie felt that her brain must be abnormal to sign a contract with this guy in front of her. Ha ha ha, Wu Ming laughed and disappeared in spirit form. I'll go out and investigate the situation first. As for food, there are ingredients in the kitchen refrigerator. You can make it yourself. You can also familiarize yourself with this house and choose a room for yourself. Well, that's it. After that, Wu Ming's aura completely disappeared. Then, forgive me for being rude. Steno said and stood up. Huh? Is the goddess going somewhere? Gadotsi asked in confusion. Ah, of course, to a room. The goddess needs to rest, Urieli replied and stood up with Steno. Master needs to rest. With that, Anna picked up the quiet Sakura Madu and followed her two sisters. Thank you. When they passed by Gadotsi, Anna's voice came softly. This voice made Gadotsi laugh. What? Aren't you being quite frank? After the three Gorgon sisters left, Olga Marie spoke. Seriously, they're all so willful. Olga Marie complained as she sat on the sofa and angrily drank tea. I feel like the director and assassin are very compatible, Gadotsi suddenly said as she looked at the complaining Olga Marie. What do you mean? I don't want that guy to be compatible. Seriously. Olga Marie glanced at Gadotsi and said calmly. Olga Marie's anger had almost subsided. After all, she got used to being angry. I'll go see what ingredients we have in the fridge. Matthew stood up and bowed to the two before walking to the kitchen. What's wrong with Matthew? Gadotsi asked after Matthew left. You noticed it too? Olga Marie crossed her arms and looked in the direction Matthew left. Yeah, Matthew is giving people the feeling that he has something on his mind. Gadotsi finished and stood up. I'll go take a look. With that, Gadotsi left. Yeah. After all, you're Matthew's master. Olga Marie said calmly as she watched Gadotsi leave. Really, when will my servant care about me? Olga Marie couldn't help but think of the only servant who was willing to contract with her, and the only one who could contract with her. In the kitchen, Matthew began to check the appliances after he found the kitchen. The gas furnace is normal. The electricity and drinking water are still there. That's great. Matthew said happily. After all, if the electricity and water were cut off, it would be terrible. Matthew. Suddenly, Gadotsi's voice came from behind Matthew. Hey. Senpai, why are you here? Matthew turned around and looked at Gadotsi who came in. Because I'm a little worried, so I came to see you. Gadotsi smiled. Foo-foo, at this moment, an unknown white creature that looked like a squirrel, cat, or dog appeared at the entrance of the kitchen while making a foo sound. Ah. It's Foo-foo. Matthew shouted in surprise. Foo, the little guy called Foo-foo called out and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder. Foo-foo's wine glass disappeared when we were running away from Stheno and Urieli. I didn't expect it to find us. Gadotsi was surprised. Of course, senpai. Foo-foo is very intelligent. Matthew smiled and stroked Foo-foo while talking to Gadotsi. Foo-foo, on the other hand, looked very obedient. If Wu-ming was here, he would be surprised. Chapter 352. It's incredible, senpai. Foo-foo only appeared in front of the two of us. Matthew smiled. Maybe it's a coincidence. Gadotsi shrugged her shoulders. He didn't think about foes matter anymore, and Gadotsi told him the purpose of his visit. By the way, Matthew, what are you worried about? Gadotsi's words made Matthew fall into silence. Actually, senpai, I can't release my noble phantasm, and I don't know the real name of the servant that I possess. Matthew said softly. Is it important that you can't release your noble phantasm and don't know the real name? Matthew is Matthew, and that won't change. Gadotsi instantly held Matthew's hand. Gadotsi, who followed Wu-ming, Olga, Marie, and the others, already knew the importance of noble phantasm. However, Gadotsi didn't think that Matthew was embarrassed because he couldn't release his noble phantasm. However, Matthew still looked very uncomfortable. I know, with Assassin Senpai, your safety won't be threatened. Matthew said little by little. That's not it. Gadotsi instantly interrupted. Matthew looked at Gadotsi with a stunned expression on his face. Assassin is very strong and reliable, but Assassin is the leader's servant, and the only servant that can protect me is you, Matthew Gillett. Gadotsi grabbed Matthew's shoulders with both hands, and looked straight into Matthew's clear eyes. Foo-foo, who was originally on Matthew's shoulder, had already jumped away. Senpai. Matthew looked at Gadotsi with a somewhat helpless expression, and then he was touched. Since we can't release the relic, we'll ask for Assassin's help when he comes back. I'm sure Assassin will have a solution, Gadotsi encouraged Matthew. But the servant's real name. Why don't we ask Assassin later? Maybe he will know. Ahahaha. Gadotsi laughed awkwardly. Really, you need someone else to confirm your servant's true name. Suddenly, Olga Marie's voice sounded. Gadotzi and Matthew turned around and saw Olga Marie at the kitchen door. Really, it's not easy to find a kitchen. Olga Marie complained casually. After all, our house was considered a small villa, and the structure was quite unique. Matthew and Gadotzi were lucky to be able to find them so easily. Sigh. Director, why are you here? Gadotzi's expression changed from embarrassment to confusion. Of course, I don't trust you to buy two. After all, there are only 2 of you in Chaldea. Olga Marie said impatiently. That. Doesn't assassin count? Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a student. After all, assassin is a servant with a special identity. Not to mention that he can't follow me back to Chaldea. With assassin's identity, I don't think the small Chaldea can tolerate him. First, he could summon by himself, and now he could change his class. No matter how you think about it, Wuming was a guy with a super mysterious identity. How could Chaldea tolerate such a hero with a special mission? Moreover, the master can see the attribute value of his servant. In short, because you are too weak, you can't see Matthew's real name. Olga Marie said as she stretched out her hand to Gadotzi and pulled Gadotzi's cheek. It hurts. It hurts. Director, please be gentle. Gadotzi complained incoherently. Humph. In short, as long as you become stronger, you can see Matthew's ability value and his real name. Work hard. Olga Marie snorted and loosened her hand that pulled Gadotzi's cheek. Yes, I know. Gadotzi's eyes were filled with tears as he rubbed his cheeks. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Then, Gadotzi seemed to remember something, so she asked Olga Marie. By the way, Director, do you know Assassin's real name? Gadotzi asked curiously. I'm also very curious about Assassin's real name. Mashu also looked at Olga Marie with a curious look. You two are so annoying. Hurry up and cook for me. Then, with Olga Marie's yelling, Matthew and Gadotzi began to busy themselves in the kitchen. How can I see something like a real name? I don't have master qualifications. If he didn't have such a cheating method, I wouldn't be his master. Olga Marie said lightly while looking at Matthew and Gadotzi busy in the kitchen. And I'm also a fake master. After Matthew and Gadotzi made some simple dishes, Wuming came back. However, Wuming returned with a rather disheveled big blue dog. A big blue dog? Gadotzi said doubtfully. That's a servant, can't you see it? Olga Marie refuted Gadotzi's words. Really, a servant in front of you can't even detect it, and it's not even an assassin. Olga Marie couldn't help but think. Yo ladies, the big blue dog greeted Gadotzi and others frivolously. Bang! Wuming gave him an elbow hit in an instant. Aw dash. Hey. I'm injured. Listening to his complaints, Wuming glanced at him with disgust. You almost left, so behave yourself, Cuculin. That's right, the big blue dog was Cuculin who caught Fergus's noble phantasm neon sword. After Wuming finished, he threw Cuculin on the sofa. Ha ha ha, but I have to say hello when I see the ladies. Cuculin was a little hurt, but he still looked frivolous. Cuculin? Is that the hero of the Long March of the Bulls? Sure enough, he looks like a playboy. Olga Marie looked at Cuculin's frivolous appearance and said awkwardly. He's the caster I said would help us, but now it seems that this guy can't even protect himself. Wuming spread out his hands. What happened? Gadotzi asked. This guy caught Fergus' noble phantasm. I didn't expect him to survive. Wuming held back his laughter and explained to everyone. Fergus? He's Cuculin's adoptive father and friend. Olga Marie was relieved. The neon sword you mentioned, is it the magic sword that can cut off 3 mountains? Yes, that's the sword. The identity of the red saber has been confirmed, it's that old rogue. Wuming said with a slightly angry expression. It seems that Assassin and Fergus must have experienced something. Gadotzi and others thought so. Ha ha ha, it's just that Fergus flirted with Maeve, you still hold a grudge. Cuchulain suddenly laughed. Chapter 353. Because Wu Ming used to work for Maeve, he was on the side of Connaught. After the war with Ulster, he ran over and said that he wanted to work for Maeve. Because of Fergus' frivolous words, Wu Ming threw him out. Of course, the process took a lot of effort. After all, Maeve was someone that Wu Ming recognized as his sister. Even if Maeve wanted to fall in love and get married, Wu Ming would never allow an old rogue like Fergus to come, not to mention that Maeve did not have such thoughts. Maeve, who was obsessed with Wu Ming, did not get married until she died. Instead, she played with men and let them die one by one under her pomegranate skirt. Moreover, they died before they could take advantage of her. Of course, Wu Ming also contributed to this. As a warrior who protected his sister's chastity, Wu Ming naturally shot those who wanted to use force. You said that you didn't want to marry Maeve, and you didn't let her find another man. You even made our two countries go to war. I really don't know what you were thinking. Cuchulain complained about Wu Ming helplessly. She was already throwing herself at you, why didn't you want her? It's fine if you don't want her. Don't get in the way of others. Don't get us involved. Back then, for some, reasons, Wu Ming had been protecting Maeve. But after all, Wu Ming was a traveler and had no plans to stay in any place. Then, in order to prevent Wu Ming from leaving, Maeve started the war between Connaught and Ulster. I don't have a choice either. Wu Ming rubbed his forehead. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this. It's all in the past anyway. Cuchulain, who hated Maeve, began to change the topic. With the identity of an enemy established, they have an advantage in launching a general attack on us, Wu Ming said. How did you escape? Wu Ming asked Cuchulain. Cuchulain was not the kind of guy who would throw his life away even if he knew that he could not win. Come to think of it, it seemed to be true, cough cough, speaking of which, Fergus wouldn't say, ah. I'm going to use my noble phantasm, and so on to let Cuchulain escape. Fergus must have judged that Cuchulain could not escape, so he released his noble phantasm. Logically speaking, Cuchulain should have left. However, Cuchulain, who was covered in wounds, smiled. Don't underestimate the Lune Rune, brother. Cuchulain smiled. Even so, Cuchulain was seriously injured. As the prototype of the holy sword, the demon's sword, I was careless. Wu Ming smiled. The Lune Rune was something that the Norse main god, Odin, had sacrificed an eye in exchange for. How could it be weak? Wu Ming had never used the Lune Rune in battle, so he had neglected the power of the Lune Rune. You are the first disciple of the Master. If the Master knew, you would be finished. Cuchulain laughed at Wu Ming. You'd better behave yourself. Who knows when you'll disappear, Wu Ming said. He disappeared in an instant and appeared in front of Cuchulain. Once again, he gave Cuchulain an elbow strike. Pfft. I said I was injured. Cuchulain rubbed his wound again and complained loudly. So, do you need to make a contract with this master? Wu Ming said, pointing to Gadotsi. After Cuchulain's explanation, his master disappeared in an instant, leaving nothing behind. Wu Ming guessed that the other black followers were the same. Although the black followers in Winterwood City had lost their master, because of the mutation of the Holy Grail, the black followers without a master could still ensure that they would not be sent back to the Hall of Valhalla through the connection of the Holy Grail. But Fergus's magic sword was not so easy to block, and Cuchulain barely survived by relying on the power of the Lune Rune. Hey! Gadotsi saw Wu Ming pointing at her, and she was a little overwhelmed. That, if Mr. Cuchulain is willing. Gadotsi said shyly. Oh. It's a young master. Of course, I am willing. Cuchulain was instantly excited when he saw that his master was a young girl. Boom! It was the sound of a huge object falling to the ground. Mr. Cuchulain, please respect yourself. Matthew stood beside Gadotsi, slammed his huge shield to the ground, and then looked at Cuchulain seriously. Fortunately, Matthew did not use too much strength, or the floor would have to be changed again. Wu Ming thought. Yes, I am very honest. Cuculin said. Wait a minute. Olga Marie walked in front of Wu Ming and Cuculin. What's the matter with you two? Olga Marie roared. Olga Marie's understanding of Cuculin had been refreshing since he came in. After all, the conversation between Cuculin and Wu Ming was very clear. Your real identity is a warrior of Connaught, the silver dragon Sira, who is as famous as Cuculin. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming's eyes. Sira? Gadotsi looked at Matthew in confusion. That, senior, it's like this. Matthew took Gadotsi's hand, quietly went to the side, and told Gadotsi about Sira in history. Oh, senior brother, you haven't told them your real name yet. Cuculin, who was sitting on the side, said gloatingly. After all, I'm not Sira now, just a man-killer fiend. Wu Ming helplessly spread out his hands. Assassin. Jack, is your real name Jack the Ripper? After hearing Wu Ming's words, Olga Marie guessed Wu Ming's real name. Fog, London, black clothes and hat, being able to call himself Jack, a pair of female noble phantoms, Olga Marie judged our real name from all this information. Man-killer fiend? Are you kidding me? How could you be a man-killer fiend? Cuculin frowned and asked in confusion. Wu Ming's senior brother, a great hero, turned into a man-killer fiend, which really damaged his image. Well, this is for the vengeful spirits of those children. I replaced them and became Jack the Ripper. Wu Ming smiled indifferently. Replaced the vengeful spirits, became Jack the Ripper. Olga Marie carefully thought about Wu Ming's words, savoring the meaning. However, Cuculin didn't understand at once. So that's how it is, as expected of you. It seems that you have experienced a lot in the future. Through Wu Ming's words, Cuculin immediately guessed why his senior brother became assassin Jack the Ripper. It was nothing more than absorbing Jack the Ripper's spiritual base, freeing the vengeful spirits that were originally trapped, and becoming Jack the Ripper himself. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then, Wu Ming looked at Olga Marie. Sorry, master, at first I wanted to hide my real name, but later I realized that you might not like this identity, so I always wanted to hide it. What an idiot. Olga Marie said softly. Olga Marie raised her head and looked into Wu Ming's eyes. You listen to me. You are my follower. No matter what, I won't mind. Looking at Olga Marie's determined eyes, Wu Ming smiled. What, a frank Olga is not bad. Chapter 354. Then, Wu Ming was scolded by the arrogant Olga Marie again. Wu Ming didn't care, after all, he was arrogant. Later, Cuculin and Gadotsi concluded a servant contract. Originally, Cuculin wanted to conclude a temporary servant contract, but because it was not conducive to physical recovery, Wu Ming forcibly changed Cuculin's mind and concluded a formal contract with Gadotsi. My body has gradually begun to recover. I didn't expect the little girl to have such excellent qualifications as a master. Cuculin felt his physical condition and couldn't help but look at Gadotsi. Of course, this was not a flirtatious look, but a surprise at Gadotsi's potential as a master. Don't underestimate Tachika, she has excellent master qualifications. Patting Cuculin on the shoulder, Wu Ming smiled. Olga Marie was a little jealous at this time. After all, her master contract with Wu Ming was a half-finished product that Wu Ming cheated. However, I still want to be my master. Wu Ming, who noticed Olga Marie's expression, continued. This made Olga Marie blush again, and Olga Marie glared at Wu Ming angrily. However, Olga Marie looked very much like an angry kitten. The food is getting cold, let's eat first. In order to avoid embarrassment, Matthew took the lead in changing the topic. Gadotsi and Matthew had already finished cooking and brought the food to the table. Now they could enjoy it directly. Suddenly, Gudazi let out a loud cry. By the way, Mr. Assassin, there is one more thing I have to trouble you with. Although Cuculin's previous recklessness made everyone know Wu Ming's other identity, the Connaught silver dragon Wu Wu-ming still asked everyone to call him Assassin or Jack. After all, he now came with this identity. Is there anything else, Tachika? Wu-ming asked gently, which made Gadatsi blush. After all, Wu-ming was really handsome in a black leather jacket and a black top hat. Can you tell Matthew's real name? Or her noble phantasm's real name is fine. Gadatsi knew that her request was a bit difficult, but she still put her hands together and begged Wu-ming. Tachika, didn't I say, as long as you become stronger, what? Noble phantasm is an instinct. Olga Marie was about to say something, but Cuculin instantly interrupted her. Marie suppressed her anger, she looked at Cuculin's eyes, and didn't say anything. Instinct? Mashu pondered over Cuculin's words. Ah, yes, it's instinct. Cuculin spread out his hands. Servant and noble phantasm, these two exist together and are not separated from each other. If you haven't been able to release your noble phantasm, it's probably because your instinct hasn't been activated. With that, Cuculin looked at Gadatsi, revealing a dangerous look, and at the same time, emitting a murderous aura. Gadatsi was a little puzzled, but Matthew and Olga Marie instantly understood what Cuculin meant. Mashu quickly raised her shield and stood in front of Gadatsi, while Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a scrutinizing look. Tachika is now your master, don't think about doing anything dangerous. After all, even if Cuculin was someone Wu-ming knew, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't do something to hurt them. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, so it was normal for her to have such thoughts. Okay, Cuculin, don't tease them anymore, Wu-ming said. Well, I'm just livening up the atmosphere. Cuculin smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the murderous aura. Then, I'll leave the noble phantasm and the real name to you. I'm going to rest, brother. After saying goodbye to Wu-ming, Cuculin's spiritual form disappeared. Wu-ming shook his head helplessly at Cuculin's character. Don't mind him, he's just like that, Wu-ming said to Gadatsi and the others. Immediately, Matthew also put down his shield and retreated to Gadatsi's side. So, can you let Matthew use his noble phantasm? Olga Marie asked, sitting on the sofa with her arms crossed in front of her chest and her legs crossed. Let's not talk about this in a hurry. Let me ask you, Matthew, did the servant who lent you his power tell you his real name? Wu-ming looked at Matthew. No. Matthew was stunned, then shook his head. Really, what was the servant who gave you power thinking? He didn't even tell you his real name and noble phantasm. It's really a headache. Olga Marie covered her head. Generally speaking, a servant's noble phantasm was related to their own life experience. Matthew didn't know the real name of the noble phantasm, so it was normal that he didn't know what the servant was. Wu-ming smiled, then Wu-ming continued to ask. So, when you saw Berserker, Lancelot, did you have any reaction? Although Matthew didn't understand Wu-ming's intention, he still thought about it. When I saw him, I didn't feel anything, but when I knew he was Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake, I was a little angry. Matthew, why are you angry? Gadatsi was a little puzzled. I don't know. Wu-ming shook his head. So, you mean that the heroic spirit who gave Matthew power has a special relationship with Lancelot? Olga Marie was a first-class magician, and she immediately guessed Wu-ming's intention. That's right. Wu-ming nodded. The reason why he asked Matthew this question was because Wu-ming knew the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power from the beginning. The most noble of the Knights of the Round Table, the Knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, the Knight of the Holy Grail. That was the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power. For a long time, Matthew had addressed Wu-ming and Gadatsi as seniors, but he didn't use the term senior to address others. He addressed Gadatsi as a senior because the two of them formed a bond in Chaldea, and others addressed Wu-ming as senior by Matthew, meaning that Wu-ming was senior Wu-ming. But in fact, Galahad was the only one who addressed Wu-ming as senior back in Camelot. Because Lancelot admired Wu-ming the most, he told his son Galahad to be particularly polite to Wu-ming, but Wu-ming didn't like the word lord, so Galahad addressed Wu-ming as senior. Although that was one of the reasons, Wu-Ming recognized that the power Matthew used was Galahad's because of the shield. The shield was basically the same as the shield that Artoria held during the Round Table Conference, but the details and size were different. Even Bedivere couldn't bear the burden of the Round Table, only Galahad could. The purest and noblest knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, only he could bear the burden of the Round Table. The servant who gave you the power to survive from the brink of death and gave you the power to protect Tachika is named Galahad. Chapter 355. Galahad. Matthew put one hand on his chest and whispered the name softly. Thank you, Assassin Senpai. Matthew bowed to Wu-Ming happily to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Matthew. Even without me, you would have known Galahad's real name sooner or later. Wu-Ming smiled and shook his head. Then, Wu-Ming gave Matthew a doji. And don't be happy too early. Although I know Galahad's real name, I don't know the real name of his noble phantasm. Why? Gadotsi was puzzled. After all, noble phantasms are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Although there are many physical weapons and noble phantasms, most of them are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Wu-Ming looked at Gadotsi and explained to her. For example, the noble phantasms of Cuchulain, Fergus, and the others were with them when they were alive. Generally speaking, this kind of noble phantasm was the name of the weapon itself, so knowing the name of the weapon would mean knowing the real name of the noble phantasm. However, there were many noble phantasms that had never been seen before in history. The most classic example was the treasured artifact that betrayed the witch Demetrius, Rule Breaker Talisman, Rule Breaker. It was the embodiment of the traitor witch's life, just like her entire life. The Rule Breaker Talisman was also full of a betrayal. Although the noble phantasm itself was not as powerful as the knife, it had the ability to nullify all magic. It could completely nullify contracts based on magic, or life forms born with magic. Needless to say, this kind of noble phantasm was much more powerful than the Gay Balg, which was a weapon with a physical body. Galahad's noble phantasm appeared after becoming a heroic spirit, so I don't know. Wu-Ming finished his explanation. Aren't you special? How can you not see through the noble phantasm of a servant? Olga Marie looked at Wu-Ming with some dissatisfaction. Then I'm really sorry. I don't know about this kind of relic that only exists after it has been upgraded. Wu-Ming shrugged indifferently. That's a pity. Gadotsi said regretfully. It's okay, Senpai. At least I already know that the servant who gave me power and my benefactor is Galahad. Matthew comforted Gadotsi with a smile on his face. Well, you're right. I've already completed half of it. When I become stronger in the future, I'll be able to find out about Galahad's noble phantasm. Gadotsi said excitedly. At this moment, Olga Marie looked at Wu-Ming. You can't get Matthew to use the relic? Wu-Ming smiled at Olga Marie's question. I didn't say that I couldn't let Matthew use the relic. I just didn't know the real name of the relic. But, how can you use the relic without knowing its real name? Gadotsi was completely confused. She tilted her head and looked at Wu-Ming with Matthew. Olga Marie, on the other hand, was frowning. Even she couldn't figure out how to use the relic without knowing its real name. Looking at the puzzled crowd, Wu-Ming began to explain about the relic. After the death of various characters, according to their life experience, they were upgraded and also obtained a trump card called the relic. The relic is the trump card of every hero, and to release this trump card, you need to call out the real name of the relic. This is indeed the case. Wu-Ming finished, sat on the sofa and poured himself a cup of tea. Speaking of which, Gilgamesh's tea was not ordinary. It had been so long, but the tea was still warm. Go on. Olga Marie said impatiently. Okay, don't worry. Wu-Ming took a sip and put the teacup down. The so-called name of the relic is actually just a form. Cuchulain also said that the relic is an instinct. Is there a limit to your instinct? If that's the case, it's not an instinct. Wu-Ming spread out his hands. Now, for Matthew, what he lacks is not only the real name of the relic, but also the recognition of the relic. Only then can he unleash the power of this table, shield. Wu Ming almost said the table, but fortunately, he changed his words in time. What did you say in the end? Gadotsi seemed to have heard something different, but she didn't hear it clearly. Ahem. Don't worry about the details. At present, we need to give Matthew's shield a real name. This time, it will be easier to release it when needed. Wu Ming quickly changed the topic. Then, how about Assassin give Matthew a real name for the relic? Gadotsi suggested. This shouldn't be done by me, but by you guys from Chaldea. Wu Ming said, looking at Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. Is it up to us? Gadotsi thought, but she didn't have a clue. Naming something, Gadotsi inexplicably felt that the world was full of malice. Then, when Mashu releases her noble phantasm, how about shouting Lord Chaldea's? Olga Marie suddenly said from the side. Lord Calds. Matthew carefully thought about the real name of the relic. Well, thank you, Director. Matthew sincerely looked at Olga Marie and thanked her. Olga Marie looked at Matthew's sincere smile and was a little stunned. No. It's nothing. Then, Olga Marie said softly. Without a doubt, Olga Marie was proud again. Great. Matthew. Then you can release the relic. Gadotsi hugged Matthew and said happily. But don't be happy too early. At this moment, Wu Ming retorted. After all, if you can't be recognized by the relic and release the relic, then the so-called Lord Chaldea's is a joke. Wu Ming looked at Matthew and Gadotsi seriously. Assassin is right. If Matthew can't release the relic, then the real name I gave you will be wasted. You have to work hard. Olga Marie encouraged. Yes. I will work hard. Matthew nodded excitedly. You too, Tachika Fujimaru. As a master, your self-awareness is really bad. I will train you later. Olga Marie said to Gadotsi sternly. It can't be. Gadotsi's face was filled with worry. For this girl who was just an ordinary person not long ago, special training was like running a few kilometers in military training. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and eat. After eating, we will train. Olga Marie pinched Gadotsi's cheek and urged. Senior, you have to work hard. Matthew cheered her on. Yes. Gadotsi said helplessly. Wu Ming looked at Matthew's figure and couldn't help but think of the pure young man, Galahad. Maybe, you didn't tell her your real name to train her. But with me here, your idea may not work. Galahad, well, I will help you train her. Wu Ming looked out of the window. Although the sky was dark, the future was full of hope. Chapter 356. After dinner, Gadotsi was dragged by Olga Marie for special training. It was called special training, but in fact, it was Olga Marie telling Gadotsi about magicians, servants, and masters. After all, even if Gadotsi stepped into the world of magicians, she was still a girl. Becoming a master meant that he might die, and Olga Marie's task was to make Gadotsi recognize all of this. She didn't want him to disappoint Mashu and be a qualified master. While Olga Marie was doing special training for Gadotsi, Wu Ming was also doing special training for Matthew. In the yard, Wu Ming and Matthew were fighting against each other. Mashu put her shield on the side of her body and was ready to fight. Wu Ming, on the other hand, wielded a silver-white longsword. That's right, it was the meteor silver. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's assassin class wouldn't have weapons of other classes, but Wu Ming cheated by bringing his noble phantoms, Dragonist, with him. Although this class couldn't release the meteor silver, it could still be used for hand-to-hand combat. As a shielder, you must have a defense that can resist all attacks. That shield is already very strong, so you have to start with the person holding it, Wu Ming said carefully. Matthew listened carefully to Wu Ming's words, nodding his little head from time to time. Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Wu Ming held the meteor silver and put it in front of him and said, Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Are you ready, Matthew? Wu Ming said sternly to Matthew. Yes. Senpai, I am ready. After saying that, Ma Shu placed her shield in front of her and looked at Wu Ming from the corner of her eyes. Let's go. After that, Wu Ming rushed toward Matthew. Clank. The holy sword and the holy shield collided, making a very harsh sound. Matthew blocked the attack and made a muffled sound. You can't do it, Matthew. You have to know that my strength is only C class. You have to adapt to this impact, or your master will die, Wu Ming criticized Matthew. Yes. Senpai. Matthew responded loudly. Again. After that, Wu Ming hit Matthew's shield again. Clank clank clank. Silent continued to attack Ma Shu's shield, and there was a burst of harsh sound. Matthew struggled to support himself and took Wu Ming's blow after blow, making muffled sounds again and again. Matthew's legs couldn't stop shaking, and his hands couldn't stop shaking, but Matthew didn't let the shield leave his hands. Drops of sweat slid down Matthew's cheeks and fell to the ground, but Matthew was still holding on. Wu Ming looked at Matthew with relief. Gadotsi was really lucky to have such a follower and junior. Gradually, Wu Ming's sword swung faster and faster. Matthew, who could still rest between swings, gradually had no chance to catch his breath. Clank 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 clank. Gradually, the meteor silver in Wu Ming's hand turned into a silver-white sword light and bombarded Matthew's shield. If one looked closely, they would find that each sword light was enchanted with magic. This was an alternative version of magic discharge. Although Wu Ming didn't have this skill, because of Wu Ming's EX level infinite magic, Wu Ming could extract the magic from his body and enchant it on the meteor silver. This was another advantage of Wu Ming. Because Wu Ming was not dead and had a powerful identity, Wu Ming had the memory of his class. For example, Cuculin, as a caster, should only have knowledge about the Lune Rune and not the spear art. However, his spear art was engraved in his bones, so even as a caster, Cuculin could still fight a few rounds with Wu Ming. Moreover, for example, Stheno and Urieli, the two of them didn't have corresponding classes at all. Because of the performance of their class, the two of them were given the ability of that class. For example, Wu Ming was now an assassin, so Jack the Ripper couldn't use magic. Therefore, Wu Ming couldn't use the magic in his mind. He could only inject magic into the runestone to detonate it. Similarly, Wu Ming couldn't use the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm because Jack the Ripper didn't have any records of using the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm. This was also the disadvantage of being a servant. It would fix the development direction of a certain class. Once a servant was summoned in a certain class, the most convenient weapon to use would be the weapon of that class. For example, if Urieli was an archer, she would have an extra bow in her hand and would have knowledge about bows and arrows. At this moment, Matthew was enduring the high-density slashes that were infused with magic. However, although Matthew looked like he couldn't hold on any longer, Matthew was still able to hold on. Matthew. Gadotsi, who had arrived at some point, looked at Matthew, who was struggling and couldn't bear to look at him. She then turned her head away. Don't turn your head away. Olga Marie stood beside Gadotsi and stared at Wu Ming and Matthew in the courtyard. She said to Gadotsi, "Did you forget what I told you? Watch them carefully." After Olga Marie finished speaking, Gadotsi seemed to have made up her mind. She clenched her fist and looked at Matthew, who was struggling to hold on. Wu Ming, of course, noticed Gadotsi and Olga Marie's arrival. Therefore, Wu Ming gave Matthew another dose of medicine. "What's wrong, Matthew? Can't you do it? Your master is watching you." Hearing Wu Ming's words, Matthew turned his head and looked to the side. Sure enough, Gadotsi was looking at Matthew intently. Matthew read something from Gadotsi's eyes. "Hold on, Matthew. I believe in you." Matthew read the sincere encouragement in Gadotsi's eyes. If I were an enemy, then I would completely defeat you and kill your master. This sentence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Matthew's eyes suddenly shrank, as if he thought of the scene that Wu Ming said. He was defeated, and Gadotsi was cruelly killed. No. Senior. Ah. In an instant, Matthew roared. The magic all over his body condensed on the shield. Matthew shook the shield violently, and a white light began to appear. A strong white wall gradually emerged. Lord Chaldea's. Chapter 357. With the release of the noble phantasm, the chalk wall appeared in front of Matthew. Bang! Wu Ming attacked the chalk wall, but he was bounced back. Chi! The meteor silver was inserted into the ground, and Wu Ming stepped on the ground to maintain his balance. The meteor silver and Wu Ming's legs were pushed back by the huge force, leaving 3 deep marks on the ground. I see, is this Galahad's noble phantasm? No, it should be Matthew's noble phantasm, the pure land of Chaldea in your heart. Wu Ming pulled out the meteor silver and looked at the chalk wall that was as pure as Matthew's heart. Then, Wu Ming put away the meteor silver. Well done, Matthew. Wu Ming gestured to Matthew and gave him a thumbs up. That's great. Matthew looked at Wu Ming's thumbs and said weakly. Matthew looked at Matthew's thumbs up. Then Ma Shu looked at Gadotsi, who was running toward her, and her vision turned black, and she fainted. Wu Ming instantly appeared behind Matthew and hugged the unconscious Matthew. Gadotsi ran over and looked at Matthew worriedly. You did well, Matthew, I'm proud of you. Gadotsi held the unconscious Matthew's hand and said with a smile. Really, your training is too cruel. Olga Marie walked to Wu Ming and looked at the unconscious Matthew and complained to Wu Ming. But Matthew persevered and released the noble phantasm, didn't he? Wu Ming looked at Matthew with relief. At least her efforts were not in vain. And now there's a strong enemy. Matthew has to do this if he wants to grow up quickly. Then, Wu Ming took out a runestone from his black ripples. The Lune rune on it represented healing. Placing it on Matthew, Wu Ming injected magic into the runestone. The runestone broke, and the pure green energy turned into light spots and merged into Matthew's body. Visible to the naked eye, Matthew's body disappeared, and even his cheeks had a trace of peace, as if he had a good dream. Athena told me that warriors can only grow in battle, but Matthew is a defensive type, so I used this method to train him. Athena? Are you hiding something from us? Olga Marie crossed her arms and stared at Wu Ming suspiciously. Silence was in Ireland and would not have anything to do with Greece. Therefore, Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming suspiciously. Ahem. I'll send Matthew back to his room first. Tachika, please take care of Matthew. Wu Ming quickly changed the topic, and then carried Matthew in his arms. As for the shield, it was naturally carried by its master. Oh, okay. Gadotsi nodded and picked up the shield. Why is it so heavy? I thought it was light. Gadotsi's face was red as she carried the shield. Usually, Matthew could carry it easily, but she didn't expect the shield to be so heavy. Matthew is a servant. Even if he is a subservient, he is still a servant. Of course, his strength is higher than yours. Come on, Tachika, this is also part of training. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi with a smile, and then left first. Wait a minute. Gadotsi carried the shield, struggled to follow Wu Ming, and left. Really, both of them are so troublesome. Olga Marie rubbed her forehead. How many things is he hiding from me? Then, Olga Marie began to think about Wu Ming's secrets. Exploring a man's secrets is the first step for a woman to fall. Suddenly, Cuculin materialized. None of your business. Olga Marie proudly stared at Cuculin. Although Cuculin was rejected, he didn't get angry or retreat. Then, Cuculin moved forward and stared at Olga Marie as if he saw something interesting. The talent of a magician is first class, but he doesn't have the talent to become a master. That's interesting. It's none of your business. Olga Marie angrily pushed away Olga Marie, who was staring at her. Cuchulain, who was pushed away, didn't get angry. He smiled casually, and then began to talk about Wuming. By the way, my brother is really resourceful. He can even make a contract with someone who doesn't have the talent to become a master. Cuchulain waved his hand and said casually. That. At this time, Olga Marie suddenly opened her mouth. Huh? Cuchulain looked at Olga Marie in confusion. Are you close to assassin? Olga Marie asked with a slightly red face. It was a little embarrassing for a proud person to put down her attitude and ask someone else. Cuchulain's eyes lit up. He had already guessed Olga Marie's thoughts. Not very close. After all, the first time we met was on the battlefield. But I heard a lot about my brother from my master. We also talk about him in our free time. After all, we are not mortal enemies. We fight all the time. If Wuming heard this, he would have hammered Cuchulain's head. If Cuchulain hadn't been serious, Wuming wouldn't have fought him to the death. Did you think that the spear of impaling death was so easy to receive? Besides, isn't there a saying that the one who knows you best is often your opponent? So, I know my brother quite well. Cuchulain looked at Olga Marie and grinned. What, do you want to know my brother's privacy? Cuchulain teased Olga Marie. Olga Marie's face turned red when she heard Cuchulain's teasing. Ahem. After all, he is my follower. It is necessary for me to know my follower's story, isn't it? Olga Marie coughed and replied righteously. Isn't there a record in human history? In fact, the stories of our heroes are basically similar to what is recorded. Cuchulain waved his hand. Instantly, Olga Marie looked at Cuchulain with a "you're dead" look. First of all, I only know my brother's story in Ireland. Cuchulain raised his hands in surrender. That's fine. Let's get started. Olga Marie thought for a moment. It was better than nothing, so she nodded. Then, Olga Marie came to the steps and sat down, waiting for Cuchulain's story. Then, Cuchulain looked in the direction of Wuming. After confirming that there was no Wuming around, he began to tell the story. His story is basically similar to what you know, but I have to tell you about him and Maeve. As if he thought of something, Cuchulain smiled gloatingly. In the beginning, my brother was a traveler. However, he said that he was traveling around, but in fact, he just couldn't find his way. Cuchulain laughed. You mean, he has no sense of direction? Olga Marie also wanted to laugh. Ah, yes, but he was a greenhorn. Now, he shouldn't have a sense of direction. Cuchulain smiled and shook his head. After that, the first place he went was Connaught, and because he accidentally saved a damsel in distress, he was entangled by Maeve. Chapter 358. In the end, Maeve's father intervened in the battle, and my brother took the opportunity to leave. After that, I never saw him again. Cuchulain, who had been leaning against the wall for a long time, stopped. The story was over. Maeve really didn't get married for assassin? Olga Marie found it hard to imagine that Maeve, who was called a slut, would keep her virginity for a man. Yes, after all, Maeve was captured by Wuming as soon as she left home. Therefore, although Maeve seemed to be dissolute in the days after that, as far as I know, she has been keeping her chastity. Cuchulain looked helpless. But even if senior brother were to follow Maeve, the war would still happen. There's no difference, Cuchulain said in an open-minded tone. After all, Maeve was called a person with a bad character by my master. Cuchulain waved his hand. Olga Marie, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look on her face as she held her chin with one hand. So that's how it is, anyway, don't get too involved with my senior. At this time, Cuchulain's tone began to become serious. The iron rule of servants is that they can't interfere too much in this era. If the girl's heart is locked onto the servant, it won't be good for either of them. Cuchulain was saying that they shouldn't rely on Wuming too much. Once the Holy Grail War is over, Wuming will leave here, and whether he can be summoned again is still a question. If it's just a one-sided love, it's okay, but if both of them have a deep sense of dependence on each other, it's really bad for both of them. It's like a common love between a god and a mortal, and in the end, it won't end well. Because not to mention the lifespan of the two, they're not on the same level. I'll think about it. After a moment of silence, Olga Marie answered. What a wonderful story just now. Suddenly, Wuming's ghostly voice came from behind Cuchulain. Ah! Cuchulain let out a strange cry and quickly distanced himself from us. However, a hand pulled Cuchulain's collar. Yo, senior, what a coincidence. Cuchulain pretended to be fine. I didn't expect you to be able to tell stories. No wonder you're a caster, Cuchulain. Wuming smiled and looked at Cuchulain. It's okay. Cuchulain smiled awkwardly. After all, no matter what, he was still talking about her behind her back, so it was a little awkward. Pay attention to the situation around you. Don't let the enemy servants take advantage of you. Wuming let go of Cuchulain after saying that. Understood. Cuchulain waved his hand at us, and his spirit form disappeared. After Cuchulain disappeared, Wuming looked at Olga Marie. At that moment Olga Marie had turned away, blushing. Didn't Cuchulain say that it's not good to know too much about a man? Wuming didn't get angry, but said in a calm tone. What can I do? You're always so mysterious. It's right for me to want to know more about you. Olga Marie replied, not to be outdone, but her voice was a little weak. Olga Marie still didn't turn around, but from the way Olga Marie's ears turned red, her face must be as red as a monkey's but at that moment. However, the fate that we have formed together will not be broken. Wuming said inexplicably. Olga Marie looked at Wuming in confusion. Wuming smiled and continued. My mission is to save this world, and your mission is to solve this singularity, isn't it? Since our goals are the same, then we are companions. Companions will definitely be able to understand each other in the future, so there's no need to rush. Companions. Olga Marie carefully thought about Wuming's words. But you will leave after this, won't you? How can we understand each other then? Olga Marie looked at Wuming. Yes, it wasn't that Wuming didn't have a chance, it was that Olga Marie didn't have a chance. Olga Marie's words reminded Wuming of the fact that Olga Marie herself was a ghost. As if he had decided on something, Wuming walked behind Olga Marie, turned his back, and sat down next to Olga Marie. Ah! Olga Marie felt the warmth on Wuming's back and screamed. What, do you care? Wuming smiled without turning his head. Oh, no, I was just startled, said Olga Marie indifferently. Wuming shook his head helplessly. The once reliable director was now like a little girl. In that case, let's get to know each other first, my master. Wuming suggested in a light tone. Olga Marie was silent. Wuming didn't say anything either, just quietly waiting for Olga Marie to speak. You know, because of my identity, I've never had any friends since I was a child, and my only teacher died in an accident. Olga Marie spoke. Although it's not a good time to complain, we still think that Olga Marie didn't have any friends because she was arrogant. After that, I threw everything I had into magic. Fortunately, my talent was there, and I became a first-class magician, and the next head of the Animus family. Olga Marie leaned on Wuming's back and continued. 3 years ago, my father, one of the 12 monarchs of the clock tower, the monarch of the astrology department, died. Olga Marie was a little sad. I became the new monarch of the astrology department, and then, in order to inherit my father's will, I became the new director of Chaldea. But, you know, the world of magicians is cruel. Olga Marie's eyes were a little dim. The other magician families began to target me, the young monarch, and the people in the family began to gradually disapprove of me, and in Chaldea, I was very busy because of all kinds of things. Olga Marie painfully held her head, her body was a little stiff. Then, I met Leviticus. At this point, Wuming could feel that Olga Marie's stiff body relaxed. Whether it was the family's disdain, the other family suppression, or the various troubles in Chaldea, as long as Lev was there, he could help me solve them. Olga Marie thought of the dead Lev, and felt a little sad. When I knew Lev was dead, I felt like the whole world was collapsing. Saying this, Wuming felt Olga Marie's abnormality. Her body and heart were constantly shaking, like the straw on a camel's back. But, you are still the director of Chaldea, the monarch of the astrology department, Olga Marie Asmerd Animus. Chapter 359. You are one of the 12 sovereigns, the director of Chaldea. Although Lev is no longer here, you still have Tachika and Matthew, and they all care about you. Although Roman seems to be quite frivolous, I believe that he is still reliable. Wuming said without looking back. Perhaps this was the so-called true love is revealed in adversity. Now, there were less than 20 people left in Chaldea. These people could continue to operate Chaldea and support Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's singularity exploration, not only because of their good character, strong will, but also because they cared about the 3 people. If they choose to give up when most of Chaldea's facilities are damaged and almost all the staff members are dead, then can you still solve the singularity smoothly? Wuming proposed. Let's not talk about other things first. Take the space travel technology, the collar transfer, for example. Without the help of Roman and the others, you can't return to Chaldea. Olga Marie was a little confused. She had never thought about these problems. Roman and the others' backup support, in Olga Marie's view, was reasonable. She didn't consider whether the remaining 20 people in Chaldea would go on strike. They care about you and believe that you will be able to solve this singularity. How about you? How should you shoulder the responsibility of a director? Do you have hope in your heart, or do you have despair in your heart? Wuming's series of questions made Olga Marie a little sluggish, and she couldn't respond for a while. Besides, don't you still have me? I am your servant. Don't forget that I am a cheating servant, so what's wrong with finding a cheating master? Wuming said frivolously. So, it's just Leviticus. You still have all of us. If we all disappear, I can understand that you're devastated. But if you're devastated because of Lev's disappearance, then you're really sorry for all of us who care about you. Listening to Wuming's words and feeling the warmth of Wuming's back, Olga Marie calmed down. At this moment, Olga Marie seemed to be out of the shadow caused by Lev's death. That's right, I'm really embarrassed like this. Olga Marie smiled, and it was a smile without the slightest arrogance. That's why, it's better to be frank like this. Wuming suddenly turned his head and looked at Olga Marie's smiling face and said. Seeing that Wuming was going to tease her again, Olga Marie was angry again. You! How dare you say Lev, you're a mere servant. Now, Olga and Marie were no longer in a state of confusion over Rafe's affairs. Mama, don't pay attention to the details. Wuming smiled and stood up. Since there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to find Gilgamesh. After all, she's not a good child who would go home on her own. Wuming said as he prepared to leave. Wait a minute. I have already told you about me, what about you? Olga Marie seriously stared at Wuming, as if to say, don't even think about running away. What do you mean by telling you about yourself? In the end, I'm the one who comforted you, you arrogant master. Wuming teased Olga Marie, making Olga Marie furious again. Assassin anyway, we still have a long way to go, I'll leave it to you to slowly discover my things. That's it, see you later. Wuming smiled at Olga Marie. After saying that, Wuming's spirit body disappeared. Still have a long way to go. That's right. Olga Marie smiled and happily returned to the house. However, she didn't know that she was already dead. However, Wuming won't let this fact come true. The cheating servant has already thought of a way to let her cheating master live. The next morning, everyone in the villa was basically in a state of deep sleep. Even several servants were resting, maintaining their spirit bodies. Cuculin yawned, which was the product of boredom. Really, why do I have to keep watch at night? I've already set up the alarm, the servants also need to rest. Cuchulain protested. Because Cuchulain spoke nonsense to Olga Marie, Wuming specially punished Cuchulain to keep watch at night in a state of non-spirit body. However, Cuchulain completely protested. Because of this, Wuming specially played a game of rock-paper-scissors with Cuchulain. The result was naturally Wuming's victory. Later, after Cuchulain began to keep watch at night, Wuming left the villa. Looking at the time, senior brother should be back soon. Cuchulain said to himself, bored. When Wuming went out, he said that regardless of whether he achieved his goal or not, Wuming would come back in the morning. At this time, a runestone next to Cuchulain suddenly burned. This phenomenon was the alarm device set by Cuchulain in the distance of the villa was triggered. Wuming's return naturally wouldn't trigger the alarm trap, and it was basically impossible for there to be any living people in this city, so the person who triggered the trap could only be one person. A servant. Cuchulain frowned. Accompanied by the golden particles, Stheno and Euryale appeared in front of Cuchulain. Is it an enemy? Stheno asked. Although Stheno and the other servants were resting in spirit body, they could still detect if something happened. Ah, yes, and it's an old acquaintance. Through the runestone set up by Cuchulain over there, Cuchulain saw the enemy's face. Where's Lancer? Is she still asleep? Cuchulain livened up the atmosphere and teased. Sister is accompanying her master. After all, her master is still a cute child. Euryale smiled and licked her lips. It felt like she was going to eat Sakura Madu. Let's not talk about that for now. He's heading this way. His target is indeed here. Cuchulain looked at the burning marks on the runestone and judged the enemy's movements. So, are you ready? I can't provide combat power. Stheno said. Ah, of course. You just need to be responsible for waking up the masters now. Cuchulain said confidently. Stheno and Euryale looked at each other, then nodded and disappeared in spirit body again. Then, let me see if you can defend against my attack, Fergus. Chapter 360. Not far from Wuming's villa, on the edge of a collapsed house, there was a half-naked man carrying a huge spiral sword. Really, such an intact house, isn't it obvious that I'm here? Fergus shook his head with some boredom. Basically, in the current Winterwood city, there were no intact houses. If they didn't turn into ruins, they would be burning. The better ones were only able to maintain the basic structure of the house, with only a small part of it collapsing. The small shop that Wuming and Olgamai found was like that. The small shop was located in a remote corner, and the fire basically didn't reach it. But these houses in Winterwood City had one thing in common, that was, they were all dilapidated. And Wuming's small villa, because of Gilgamesh's protection, the villa was beautiful and intact. The house looked like a high-rise bungalow, incomparably obvious. Maybe it's the residence of a servant. Let's go and take a look. Fergus said as he walked toward the villa. After taking a few steps, Fergus clearly felt traces of magic around him. Boom! Fergus raised his sword and blasted it toward a house that had been turned into ruins somewhere around him. The ruins were blown away in an instant, and it was completely destroyed. At the same time, the traces of magic also disappeared. Detection? Could it be Cuchulain? Fergus thought. Although it was impossible for Cuchulain to survive his noble phantasm, there were exceptions to everything. As Cuchulain's adoptive father and friend, Fergus naturally wouldn't underestimate Cuchulain. Cuchulain did have the ability to survive this magic sword. This is my negligence. If it's Cuchulain, he can indeed survive. Fergus showed a man's smile. Since that's the case, then let's fight again. Fergus sped up as he spoke. However, Fergus didn't notice that the rune of Rune had already started to burn on the path he had to pass through. Cuchulain, who was far away in the villa's courtyard, closed his eyes and felt the arrival of Fergus, then smiled. I'm a caster, Fergus. After that, Cuchulain moved his finger. Boom! Around Fergus' position, intense flames erupted and rushed into the sky. The sound of the explosion resounded through the clouds. What? Is the enemy's servant attacking us? Gadatsi's bracelet shouted in panic as he rushed over. Calm down, Doctor. The enemy is not coming, Matthew said calmly. Is that so? It's never wrong to be a little more careful. Roman laughed awkwardly as he tried to salvage the situation. However, this only made things even more awkward. BZZT BZZT BZZT. Then, Roman's image appeared beside Gadatsi. Is this Cuchulain, the son of Light of Ireland? Roman asked as he looked at Cuchulain, whose eyes were closed. Regarding the current situation, as well as various information, Mashu had already reported to Chaldea, so Roman also knew about Cuchulain. What's with the sound of a soft-footed shrimp? Cuchulain opened his eyes and looked at Roman. Soft-footed prawn. Roman turned around in disappointment, looking like he couldn't take it anymore. Pull yourself together, Roman. Romeo. Olga Marie scolded Roman. Ahahaha. Doctor, you have to be strong. Gadatsi comforted Roman somewhat weakly. Then, Gadatsi looked at the explosion in the distance that had almost stopped. Is that your noble phantasm, Cuchulain? It's really spectacular. Matthew thought for a moment and denied Gadatsi's words. It shouldn't be, senpai. For a noble phantasm, its power is a bit too weak. Although Matthew's noble phantasm was also very weak, in Matthew's opinion, the noble phantasm of the Son of Light of Ireland should not be like his own. Matthew is right. This is just a magic explosion caused by me using the magic workshop to connect to the ley lines. It's not a noble phantasm. Cuchulain nodded and confirmed Matthew's conclusion. When Cuchulain came to the villa, Wuming asked Cuchulain to build a magic workshop around the area. Once a magician built a magic workshop, he was no longer a candidate for the weakest servant, but a candidate for the strongest servant. So, that means. At this time, Roman had recovered. He turned around and looked at everyone seriously. The enemy hasn't left yet, Olga Marie said calmly, crossing her arms over her chest. That's right, the enemy servant did not leave. With that, Cuchulain closed his eyes again and slammed his staff on the ground. The enemy is the warrior of the Red Branch Knights, Fergus MacRoy. Be prepared for the enemy's attack. Fergus MacRoy, the magic sword user? It's really a headache. Olga Marie frowned. Now that assassin has not come back, and the two goddesses can't fight. At present, we only have Caster Cuchulain, Lancer Anna, and Shielder Matthew. The enemy is Fergus, the magic sword user, which is very unfavorable for us. Listening to Olga Marie's analysis, Matthew, Gadatsi, and Roman on the screen all looked at Olga Marie strangely. It feels like. Leader, the enemy is different from before. Gadatsi said slowly. Well. It seems to be more confident and more majestic. Matthew also nodded, indicating that he agreed with Gadatsi's statement. Hey. Leader, what happened to you? Roman asked directly. No. You will be the temporary administrator of Chaldea for me. Don't ask so much. Then, Roman was scolded by Olga Marie. Poor doctor. Gadatsi and Matthew looked sympathetically at Roman, who had a, I was wrong, please forgive me, look. Matthew, protect Tachika. Roman, you assist Cuchulain to detect the surrounding magical situation. I'll go find Anna. Olga Marie ordered. Yes. Leader. At this time, Anna's voice came. No, I'm already here. A soft and delicate voice came from behind everyone. Anna was wearing a large hooded cloak and holding a scythe. Miss Anna, where is Miss Sakura Madu? Matthew asked with concern. I asked my sisters to take care of her. Anna answered concisely. That's right, They can only take care of the little girl since they can't fight. Olga Marie nodded. After all, the two of them were the enemy's servants. If they were suddenly controlled by the command curse, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the restraint of the heavenly lock was still necessary. Detected a high-density magical reaction in front of us. Speculated to be a noble artifact. Roman's voice suddenly came. What? Everyone didn't expect the opponent to use a noble artifact as soon as he came, and the opponent's movement speed was too fast. Ha ha ha. Take this move of mine. Cuchulain. Caladbalg. Chapter 361. Caladbalg, Neon Sword. A rainbow-colored beam of light came from a short distance away. Everything that was shrouded by the rainbow-colored beam of light turned into ashes. Like a surging wave, the rainbow-colored beam of light rushed towards them and soon arrived in front of Cuchulain and the others. Matthew. Gadotsi shouted quickly. Yes. Clang. Matthew stuck his 2-meter-tall shield into the ground. Lord Chaldeas, simulating the beginning of humanity. Hum. The air seemed to vibrate and made a buzzing sound. White lines appeared and formed the shape of a brick. Then, the brick appeared and became solid. A holy chalk wall appeared in front of everyone. Boom. The rainbow-colored beam of light hit the chalk wall and made a loud noise. Ugh. Matthew struggled to support his shield, and the tall chalk wall was faintly falling. Fergus's noble phantasm was an A++ grade noble phantasm. Matthew had just been able to release his noble phantasm yesterday, so it was still a little difficult for him to fight against the neon sword. At this moment, Cuchulain waved his staff. At this moment, countless lune runes appeared around the villa, including the ground inside the villa. Countless lune runes turned into pure magic and attached to the chalk wall in front of Matthew. The chalk wall became unusually strong and resisted Fergus's noble phantasm, the neon sword. Soon, the rainbow-colored beam of light disappeared, and Matthew successfully resisted the neon sword. These runes of runes that I set up just in case have come in handy. Cuchulain grinned. Thank you very much, Mr. Cuchulain. Matthew took a short break. Soha held his shield and thanked Cuchulain. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. The enemy is coming. Cuchulain's expression became serious. Oh. This is the warrior who resisted my noble phantasm. I didn't expect it to be a delicate girl. A hearty voice came from where Cuchulain was looking. Matthew and the others began to get ready. A burly man walked over. The 3 deep scratches on his chest were quite conspicuous. Although it was within my expectations that the relic would be blocked, I didn't expect it to be such a beautiful girl. Fergus said heartily as he looked at Matthew with praise. However, Matthew felt that Fergus's eyes were full of aggression. Although I expected you to find this place, your speed is beyond my expectations, Cuchulain said to Fergus. Well, we have a good caster on our side. His brain is more flexible than yours. Fergus laughed. Cuchulain and Olga Marie secretly noted this down. This was another piece of valuable information. Then, let's end the feeling. This way, I can rest. This trip to the modern world was really boring. Fergus raised his magic sword once again. Is he going to release his noble phantasm again? Olga Marie was surprised. The magic consumption of the A++ level noble phantasm was quite large, but Fergus was able to release 2 noble phantasms in less than a minute. It was amazing. After all, I have a master who is like a cheat. Fergus's spiral sword began to condense a colorful light. Then, I'll do it again. Matthew dragged his tired body and was ready to release his noble phantasm again. However, Cuchulain smiled. Then you have to hurry up, Fergus. That's why he's back. As soon as Cuchulain's voice fell, countless swords, spears, swords, and halberds suddenly bombarded Fergus. These were all noble phantasms. Boom, boom, boom. Countless noble phantasms caused violent explosions. The wind blew so hard that Olga Marie and Gadazi couldn't open their eyes. Master. Matthew quickly stood in front of Gadazi, blocking the hurricane for her. Behind Olga Mary, a figure appeared and supported her. So you're back. Olga Marie felt relieved when she felt the broad shoulders behind her. At present, if one were to talk about the backbone of this small team, it would be none other than Wu Ming. And I've brought a surprise, Master, Wu Ming said with a smile. Countless noble phantasms stopped shooting, and the explosions also stopped. Wu Ming waved his hand, and a wind attribute rune stone appeared, blowing away all the smoke and dust caused by the explosions, revealing Fergus, who was in the center of the explosion. Even if it was Fergus, under the noble phantasm's attack, his neon sword's noble phantasm would have been interrupted. Fergus was also injured by the noble phantasm and the explosion. Fergus knelt on the ground with one knee, supporting himself with his magic sword. Oh, I see. You guys found her. Fergus seemed to know who made the noble phantasm attack just now, and said with a clear conscience. Humph. Mongrel, bastard. Last time, you escaped. This time, this king won't be careless. Gilgamesh's figure appeared on the broken street lamp. Gilgamesh, who had left the villa alone, was finally found by Wu Ming. Gilgamesh was wearing a rather revealing golden armor. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and looked at the embarrassed Fergus with anger in his eyes. Yo, did you rope Archer in? Cuchulain came to us, and said with surprise. As the existence who set up the magic workshop, Cuchulain said that when Fergus released the first neon sword, he noticed that Gilgamesh, Wu Ming, was approaching. Thus, Cuchulain didn't rush to deal with Fergus. Instead, he chatted with him to pass the time. However, Wu Ming shook his head. Archer is one of my people. There's no need to talk about roping him in. When he said this, not only Cuchulain, but also Olga Marie were surprised. Listening to Wu Ming's words, it didn't seem like a simple alliance. Olga Marie thought carefully. Well, it's fine as long as he's one of us. Cuchulain waved his hand and didn't ask anything. After all, it was useless to know that Gilgamesh was one of them. Olga Marie looked at Gilgamesh and Wu Ming with a guessing gaze. Let Fergus leave, Gil. Then, Wu Ming said to Gilgamesh. Annoying, of course I know. Gilgamesh refuted Wu Ming, and then stretched out his hand. A few golden ripples appeared around Fergus, and a few silver chains instantly tied up Fergus, who was injured and didn't manage to dodge. It seems that I'll have to stop here. Although Gilgamesh's Enkidu only had a special attack on enemies with divinity, for a servant like Fergus with high strength, he could still break free. However, Gilgamesh used Enkidu's Enkidu to deal with Fergus, and only needed a moment to bind him. Poochie. Chapter 362. A few high-level relics appeared from the golden ripples and pierced through Fergus, who was bound by Enkidu. Fergus's body began to glow. It was a sign that the hero's spirit was about to leave the stage. Well, I don't expect to be able to escape a second time after meeting you. Although Fergus was about to leave, he still smiled calmly. This is the price you have to pay for daring to recklessly size up this prince. As he spoke, Gilgamesh moved his arm again. Golden ripples appeared and a high-level relic appeared, cutting Fergus in half. In an instant, Fergus' corpse turned into blue mana particles and disappeared with the wind. At this point, Red Saber Fergus McRoy exited. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Gadazi and the rest who were next to Wu Ming. Is this your new partner? Hyunryong, you're so useless. Gilgamesh looked at Gadazi and the rest and laughed. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming in surprise. It was a different way of addressing him. Although you're weak, your courage to look directly at this king is commendable. Gilgamesh stopped laughing and praised Gadazi and the rest. Alright, get ready. We're going to Winterwood City's Big Hollow, Wu Ming said. Soon, the courtyard of the villa was cleared. As Fergus's neon sword covered a large area, part of the villa was destroyed. The courtyard was filled with broken stones. After all, Matthew had just been able to release his relic not long ago. He could not completely protect the villa. His relic could only protect Gadotsi and the rest. Therefore, the villa, including the roof, was basically destroyed. In the courtyard, Gilgamesh sat on his exclusive seat. He closed his eyes and crossed his arms as he waited. Gadotsi and the rest looked serious. They looked at Wuming and waited for Wuming to speak. Roman turned on the remote screen, which was rare. The screen appeared next to Gadotsi. However, when Roman appeared, Gilgamesh looked at Roman differently. Stheno and Urieli brought Sakura Madu out of the room. As soon as Tongning came out, she ran into Anna's arms and hugged him tightly. It seemed like the neon sword had scared the little girl. Now, there are only 4 enemies left, Wuming said. Apart from King Arthur, the Black Saber, we've also confirmed the identities of the Red Rider and Red Lancer. The Red Rider is the king of the Kingdom of Macedon. He's known as the Conquering King and Alexander the Great. His name is Iskandar Alexander. That king, huh? Roman pondered. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, snorted in displeasure. This gave Roman a fright. To Gilgamesh, there was only one king in the world, and that was his hero king, Gilgamesh. Ignoring Gilgamesh's snort, Wuming continued. The identity of the Red Lancer has also been confirmed. He's the great hero of India, Karna. This statement caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. Although they were prepared for this, they still found it hard to believe. After all, Karna was too powerful. But you can rest assured that with Gil here, you can rest assured. Wuming comforted everyone. As if responding to Wuming's words, Gilgamesh opened his eyes and glanced at everyone with his red pupils. That great hero will be handed over to this king. Just watch. Gilgamesh said domineeringly. He's really reliable, ahahaha. Gadotsi laughed. The identity of the Red Caster is still unknown. He was too cautious and did not reveal his real name. Not to mention the noble phantasm, he basically did not reveal anything. He has been following the Red Rider like an ordinary person. Wuming frowned. Well, I'll deal with the caster first. Gil will deal with Karna. Anna and Cucullin will deal with the Conquering King. Wuming began to assign tasks. Understood. Cucullin replied, and Anna just nodded. This king can easily deal with Karna. Gilgamesh said proudly. You have the capital to be proud, but I don't want to clean up the mess for you in the end. Wuming said flatly. This king knows. Although he was still proud, he was frank this time. Then, Wuming looked at Cucullin and Anna. Iskandar is a high-level heroic spirit. You have to be careful. Don't worry, if we can, we will make him leave. If we can't, we will just hold him back. Cucullin said with a smile. Wuming saw that Anna did not move and Cucullin smiled and nodded helplessly. I hope it will go well. Wuming always felt that Iskandar was not so easy to deal with. The other party was a king with the title of Conquering King. That. Master Assassin, what about us? At this time, Matthew raised his small hand and asked like a good student. Gadotsi also looked at Wuming playfully. Assassin, you didn't forget about us, did you? How could that be? I gave you the most important task. Wuming said with a smile. Could it be? Olga Marie had almost guessed it, the only enemy that no one dealt with. Black Saber, King Arthur, that is your opponent. As if following Olga Marie's words, Wuming directly revealed the mystery. Hey hey hey! Matthew and Gadotsi shouted. They never thought that the one they had to deal with was the ultimate boss, King Arthur. Have confidence in yourself, Matthew, Tachika. Wuming advised the two. You have this shield of reason. It's just a holy sword, you can definitely defend against it. But. Matthew was still a little worried. No matter what, sending an immature follower was too rash. When he thought of the power he used was the power of King Arthur's knight, Galahad, Matthew was a little worried. Using the power of a subordinate to fight against a loyal superior, Matthew inevitably felt a little uncomfortable. I remember that there is a story that compares who is stronger between a shield and a spear. Then this time, let's compare who is stronger between a holy sword and a holy shield. Wuming walked to Matthew's side and patted Matthew's little head. This attracted the attention of Olga Marie and Gilgamesh. Li Xiang is here too. Don't be discouraged just because the enemy is King Arthur. You have to protect your master. Matthew looked at Gadotsi, then looked at Wuming and nodded confidently. Yes, I understand, Senpai. Then, I will follow Matthew and Tachika, Olga Marie suddenly said. You don't need my help, do you? Olga Marie looked at Wuming. Of course, as your follower, I am very strong. Wuming nodded. It was a wise choice to let Olga Marie follow Matthew and Gadotsi. The reliable Olga Marie could take care of the nervous too. Gilgamesh looked at Olga Marie critically, then shook his head disinterestedly and said nothing. Stheno and Euryale, you two will be responsible for protecting Sakura Madu. Even if most of your power is sealed by Enkidu, you can still protect a little girl. Wuming looked at Stheno and Euryale. Of course. Leave it to me. The two answered affirmatively. Then, Wuming glanced at everyone. In short, the enemy may gather in the big hole in Winterwood City based on our movements. What we need to do is to defeat them, repair the singularity, and save the world. Everyone, do your best. Oh. Chapter 363. Everyone began to move towards the Yuanzhong mountain. However, civilians should just walk on the ground. Gilgamesh said proudly and took out Vimona from his gate of Babylon. Accompanied by a loud roar, Gilgamesh left angrily. Why would he be angry? So Gilgamesh invited Wuming to go to Vimona together, but Wuming refused. So Gilgamesh left angrily. You really dare, Hero King's eyes are burning with fire. Cucullin said beside Wuming. Gadotsi and the others all nodded frantically. Just now, everyone could see Gilgamesh's anger. After all, I'm going with Gilgamesh. What if you get into trouble? Wuming was right. Although Wuming seemed to have 7 servants, they didn't have much combat power. Stheno and Euryale, because they were bound by Wuming's fake Enkidu, they couldn't fight. Matthew and Anna, both of them were immature servants. One was a sub-servant that had just been given power, and the other was a young servant that was summoned in an immature state. Their attribute values were not strong, they could be regarded as average. Although the two of them had great potential, it was just potential. It was the same as having an attribute value of D++. Although they were only D class, they could burst out 3 times the power at a critical moment, and they could instantly surpass a class. But that was only for a moment, and they were only D class under normal circumstances, so it couldn't be counted as strength. As for Cucullin, Cucullin was summoned as a caster. He wasn't weak, but the general ability value of a caster servant was very low. Once they encountered a surprise attack, the chances of them surviving were not high. Now, only Gilgamesh and Wuming could serve as trump cards. Gilgamesh had the Gate of Babylon, which contained countless treasures. Moreover, he had the guile-parting sword Ea, which gave him an invincible battle strength. However, your frontal combat ability is not strong. You can ambush the enemy, but you are not suitable to deal with the enemy's surprise attack. Olga Marie naturally understood this principle and analyzed it. She believed that Wuming also understood this principle. Although Wuming was strong, it was summoned as an assassin. Its attributes were more inclined towards assassination and detection, and its relic was targeted at females. Its skills were only for an assassin, so it could not be called a trump card. Therefore, Wuming could follow Gilgamesh and leave first. However, Wuming rejected Gilgamesh's proposal. I naturally have a way. Wuming smiled and remained mysterious. Let's not talk about this first. In the current situation, I think it is wiser for us to go together. Cuculin also expressed his own opinion. Well, that's it. Wuming smiled and said nothing. He continued to move forward. Gadotsi and others followed. Olga Marie was helpless for a while and then followed the large group. By the way, why do you know so much? Olga Marie asked. Everyone could understand that Olga Marie was asking about the enemy servant's intelligence. When he heard Olga Marie's question, Wuming thought of what happened last night. Wuming went out to look for Gilgamesh and accidentally met a few servants. They were the red-haired Red Rider and the unusually cautious Red Caster who dressed like an ordinary person. When he was exchanging information with everyone, there was one thing that Wuming didn't mention. Even if Wuming had seen Caster's appearance before. Wuming once looked for Gem Man Zelik and saw a young man beside him. It was said that he was Emilo II, the current monarch of modern magic. However, Wuming was sure that the person was not Emilo II. According to Wuming's speculation, it was likely that he was relying on something else. After that, it seemed that Caster's noble phantasm exposed Wuming's whereabouts. In order to avoid trouble, Wuming quickly left. After all, the main task was to find Gilgamesh, not to fight with the enemy. Rider and Caster didn't chase after him, so Wuming left safely. Later, it seemed that Gilgamesh also sensed Wuming's aura, so he drove Wuming to Wuming's side. After all, Wuming was now Gilgamesh's master, so they could naturally sense each other when they were not far away. After finding Gilgamesh, Wuming didn't rush to take Gilgamesh back to the villa. Instead, he found a roof and asked Gilgamesh if he knew any information about the enemy. So, Wuming knew the identity of Iskandar and Karna, but he didn't know the true identity of Caster. The real names of Iskandar, Karna, and Darius III were told to Wuming by Gilgamesh. According to Gilgamesh, Iskandar reported his name at the beginning, and he also reported the real name of Darius III. It had to be said that Iskandar's king's demeanor was quite heroic. Since Winterwood City was suddenly burned by a fire, Gilgamesh left the villa. On the surface, he said that he came out to have fun, but in fact, Gilgamesh was worried about Wuming's situation, so he went out to find Wuming. After sensing that the contract between Wuming and himself was still there, plus Gilgamesh was instigated by some people, as a result, Gilgamesh kept fighting with several servants. Wuming observed several small explosions on the tall building, many of which were caused by Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh treated Fergus cruelly because Fergus flirted with Gilgamesh, and as a result, he was chased by Gilgamesh. Because this is the information that Gil collected during this time, plus the information that I collected. She caused a lot of trouble outside. Wuming smiled. Then what do you have to deal with the incoming enemies? Olga Marie continued to ask. Wuming stopped, turned his head, and looked at everyone. This. Gadotsi and the others looked at Wuming attentively. It's a secret. Wuming smiled mischievously. Gadotsi and the others almost fell to the ground. You bastard. Olga Marie angrily clenched her fists and looked at Wuming. Ha ha ha, as expected of senior brother. Cuculin also laughed. On the contrary, the three Gorgon sisters didn't care about this from the beginning, and they didn't feel disappointed or tricked. Just in time, the enemy is coming, senior brother, show us. Although Cuculin said jokingly, his expression became serious. Boom. Moo. Accompanied by the roar of thunder and the roar of the sacred bull, a chariot pulled by two bulls flew from the sky. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.